Three, two, one.
A memory's never finished as long as you're alive. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Franchise Deep Dive, the podcast where we break down, dissect, and discuss all of your favorite and least favorite movie franchises. I'm Jake.
And I'm Josh.
And today we are continuing our February month of love with another trilogy that focuses on romance, but does so in a much more honest and nuanced way. That being, of course, the Before Trilogy from director Richard Linklater. If you guys aren't super into film or you just haven't really heard of Richard Linklater, you may know him from his other works like Dazed and Confused, one of the greatest all-time hangout movies in my opinion, School of Rock, and he actually had a recent film come out last year in 2024 called Hitman over on Netflix starring Glenn Powell. I thought it was pretty good, nothing amazing, but still fun. But yeah, we just felt after doing the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy that it would be fun to kind of do a trilogy that focuses on a relationship between two characters, and that's really the entire plot. But it does it in a much more creative way than like 50 Shades of Grey does, needless to say. But yeah. I think that goes without saying. But before we get into the movie trilogy, I know we have 3 movies to talk about, guys, but when this episode is airing, obviously it'll be late February, so right before the Oscars, and we're kind of fresh off of getting the Oscar nominations announced. They kind of delayed it because of the Los Angeles wildfires, and obviously from the Franchise Deep Dive guys, our kind of hearts and prayers go out to the people who, had to deal with all of that, and we hope everyone's okay and people are recovering and recuperating as best as they can. But the nominations had gotten delayed, and they've now recently come out. A couple of snubs, couple of odd choices, a couple of heated, controversial picks, and I figured it would just be kind of fun before we get into the 3 Before movies to just kind of briefly discuss the Oscar nominations and how we feel about them. And So anything off the bat that kind of tickles your fancy in terms of what you want to discuss?
Yeah, so honestly, Jake, I feel a little ashamed. I'm pretty rusty on like the nominations. I have not looked at the list. I just kind of know a couple from just like looking at the movies themselves and seeing that they have an Oscar nom. Yeah. So I'm brushing up on the list right now. I know one of the big talks, I haven't seen it, is Emilia Perez. We're hearing a lot that's looking like it could be the Crash of 2025, which is almost 20. It's exactly 20 years later, right?
Yeah, Crash was 2004. 20 year difference. Yeah, you're getting a lot of comparisons with Emilia Perez to movies like Crash, and the Green Book is another one. These sort of, I don't want to say Oscar bait, but movies that don't feel like they were designed to tell compelling stories. I also haven't seen Emilia Perez. I want to throw that out there. I will get to it before the Oscars ceremony. I just haven't had a moment to kind of sit down and watch it. But from the, I'm sure, I don't know about you, but I've seen a couple of clips from the movie, and I'm already not the biggest musical person. I'm just more so surprised that, and we kind of discussed this a little bit before the podcast, but Emilia Perez being a film that isn't really loved by a lot of people, critics, audiences. It doesn't seem like anyone's really in love with the film. You're seeing a lot of negative responses towards it online, through like social media, film discourse and whatnot. It's interesting because, again, 13 nominations, which is tying it with some pretty classic, iconic films, and films which at the time were very well spoken of, very beloved. This seems to be the first one that has garnered so many nominations, but isn't really a beloved film. So it's just an interesting kind of position.
I mean, yeah, Crash wasn't even nominated for that many, so 13 is wild.
Yeah, 13 is crazy.
I keep thinking like it's tied with the most, but I remember that it's actually 13 wins. That Return of the King, is it Titanic, and I think Ben-Hur have.
Movies. I'm looking it up as we speak. So there are, I don't know about wins, but there are 13 other films with 13. There are. Hold on, I messed that up. There's a couple of other films with 13 nominations. Let's see. No, this is not it. Hold on.
Okay, I
Why
lied.
is it so
While
hard?
Jake is looking for that, I will correct myself and say I think it's actually 11 Oscars, because so far Ben-Hur and Titanic both have 11 wins. So let's just check on that Return of the King, because either that's also 11 or possibly 13. Okay,
just
no,
wanna know
so
what-
11's the record
For wins.
for wins.
So
Let's
that's
see what
something I don't foresee. Cut to March 2nd when the Oscars air, and we'll see if I'm wrong or not. I don't see, based just on what people are saying about Emilia Perez, I don't see the film getting 13 wins.
Whoa, I don't think I knew this. Return of the King. This has to be like the first. So they were nominated only for 11.
Yeah.
And they won 11.
Wow, clean sweep, huh?
Yeah,
That's impressive.
Yeah,
That's
Let's see
impressive.
what-
I mean, at the time in 2003, I don't know what you would have that really compared to Lord of the Rings on like a technical level. Like that, those movies are incredibly well made, from just the production to cinematography and direction and performances and sound, and they're some of the best blockbusters just ever made. So to know that Emilia Perez has more nominations than that
is insane.
striking, needless to say. But
I think Titanic has 14 noms, and I think Ben-Hur has 12 noms. So Amelia Perez also has more noms than Ben-Hur. Crazy.
wow,
Crazy.
must be
Good
one of the
stuff.
greatest films of all time, I guess.
stuff.
Guess we'll
I can't
have
wait.
to
I
and
can't wait to see it. Yeah,
me
'cause
too. Can't wait to sit down and view that one. But no, so moving on from Emilia Perez, and I guess a little bit of more positive news, and I don't think you've seen this film yet, but one of my favorite films of 2024, The Substance, which if you guys haven't checked it out, I highly recommend getting just a free trial of Mubi on Amazon Prime. You can get it through them, and watching The Substance as it's on Mubi right now. Excellent movie, horror film, body horror specifically, with satirical comedy mixed in. It's a really, really excellent movie from all perspectives. Obviously, I think it got 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Director, Best Picture, and Demi Moore's first Oscar nomination in her kind of long storied career, which is just really cool to see a woman who has been in the industry for a really long time and have never really garnered that critical acclaim. I believe she's gone on record recently as saying that years ago she was told by, I don't know if it was an agent or a producer, but that she was a quote unquote popcorn actress who like wasn't meant to be in like serious films. And so for her to just kind of give the ultimate fuck you by starring in this movie in a very vulnerable role that kind of mirrors her own life in certain elements, obviously dramatized, but it was really cool. A, for her, but also B, that horror is a genre that notoriously the Oscars just don't really pay any attention to. So to see The Substance get so much love is just cool.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel? Because I know you're very big on. Let me just double check that it's not nominated. Challengers.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Challengers, Luca Guadagnino, obviously Zendaya. It's really, in my opinion, one of the best films of last year. I get a lot of people not particularly vibing with the story, as it is a sports drama that probably focuses on the drama way more than the sport, and I think that probably turned a lot of people off. The marketing didn't do itself any favors. It spoiled a lot of big elements that would occur in the film.
I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, and in the way that it was marketed, it made it kind of look like this like really over sexualized 3-way movie. Like, oh, it's the Zendaya tennis 3-way movie, and it's really not that at all. But really, for it to not get nominated for best editing or best musical score was shocking. I thought if anything, it would get those 2 categories because the editing is phenomenal. They balance. It's a movie that jumps around different, I don't want to say time periods, but it goes, past, present, and future, and kind of moves sporadically throughout 3 different time periods. But it does so with like effortless ease. It's so well edited, just like sequence editing, like the whole film, and then also in scene, the way that it's cut is just near perfect in my opinion. And yeah, the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score, in my opinion, the best score of the year. Unfortunately, just didn't get any attention from the Oscars.
Better than Brutalist.
Yeah, I think The Brutalist is a better overall movie, but I just remember the music and how it was utilized in Challengers a lot more.
Let me guess, a lot of silent scenes.
No. Well, no, actually, this one kind of goes back on my recent sentiment about using music less. They honestly use the score a lot in the movie. To to some people's dismay, some people say it's overused. And again, I could see that criticism, but yeah. What else do we have? I don't want to talk too long about this. Again, we still have some movies to fully discuss, but it was cool seeing Nosferatu, I think, get 4 nominations, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, that sort of stuff. I think it got a Best Sound Award or nomination as well, so would have loved to have seen Robert Eggers get a Best Director nomination, but speaking of Best Director, Denis Villeneuve not getting nominated for Dune Part 2, I think is a pretty big kind of miss on the part of the Academy.
Let me go to the directing section. Obviously Emilia Perez is there. I'm trying to think of, because I still have a lot to see, guys, so like I can't speak on a lot of these. Happy to see Nora getting a lot because I really loved that film.
Nora was wonderful. I honestly, if Demi Moore or Mikey Madison win for Nora, I'd be completely fine with either of them.
My top films, my top 3 was probably Brutalist, Nickel Boys, and then I think Memoir of a Snail, which obviously they don't really put them in Best Picture. Wasn't there one time that they did with I think Up?
Toy Story 3.
Was it 3?
Toy Story 3 was nominated in 2010 for Best Picture. Yeah.
It's just so weird when they pick and choose one. Like it was like a once and done thing.
Yeah, I really do wish that animation had got, just in general, would get more respect and attention, especially during award season. I know you were huge on Memoir of a Snail. I know it cracked my top 10 of the year. Didn't get to see Nickel Boys, so hopefully I'll, be able to get a chance to see that before the award ceremony happens. But
Up was. I think, it says Up was also nominated for Best Picture.
Oh, wow. Okay, so two instances, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that was the first. I don't think that ever happened before. But
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprised Ratatouille didn't get nominated for Best Picture, but
actually it might have, and I don't feel looking up every.
Yeah, it's all right. We'll move past it. We'll move past it. We don't. That's not what we're diving deep into today. But yeah, I think in terms of like Oscar nominations, I don't know if there's too much controversy. We talked challengers. Denis Villeneuve getting snubbed. I do really wish that Margaret Qualley had gotten nominated for Best Supporting Actress, but I'm very, very happy to see, Felicity Jones is her name, right? Felicity Jones?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Felicity Jones for The Brutalist getting a Best Supporting Actress nomination because I thought she was phenomenal in The Brutalist. And
yeah, I'm very happy for her and Guy Pearce because they I think I expected more from Felicity Jones to give that kind of performance, but I was not expecting it from Guy Pearce.
I think it's Guy Pearce's best performance of his career. I thought it was fantastic. So, all around really great. Cool to see Brady Corbett getting a Best Director nomination, and I feel like The Brutalist is going to do very well at this Academy
I think
Awards.
so. I think it's going to be kind of like how Birdman did. Like I wasn't expecting Birdman to win Best Picture. I definitely thought it was going to be Boyhood. So I think it could kind of be like that, that kind of thing. Although it's getting a lot of praise, like even like not even just critically, but like audiences are like. It's kind of a little bit more mixed there. Like I'm still seeing the mixed reviews, but definitely more than I was expecting it to get.
I could definitely see The Brutalist doing well at the Oscars solely for the fact that out of all the films that I think are nominated, and again I haven't seen Nickel Boys, but just with The Brutalist, it feels the most old Hollywood. When I saw it, it really just did remind me. I know people had brought up something like you specifically had brought up There Will Be Blood, which obviously it shares a lot of similarities with, but just old school Hollywood cinema, like from the 60s and 70s, films like The Godfather, just these sort of sprawling historical epics that are really kind of large in scope and scale, but are still very personal stories. You just don't really get a lot of films made like that anymore. Like you're not going to get a lot of 3.5 hour films with an intermission, pretty much solely based around this immigrant architect. Like it's just you don't really get a lot of films like that. So I think a lot of old Hollywood voters are going to really love that.
It's kind of weird that like those 3 movies you just named, how grand the scope is and how like big the film feels, but it's so centered on the character. I always find it interesting that it's like those character studies. It's not saying all of them, but like when they're a big movie, like it feels as big as like, like just like a huge like world building movie would feel. Obviously there isn't like it doesn't put like the attention into like the world building like that, but it's like it feels grand like that.
Yeah,
but it's
and
like
that,
so
to me, like,
central to the characters.
Without like being pretentious or sounding pretentious, to me, films like The Brutalist and by extension, other kind of films like Nosferatu and The Substance this year, those are films that just, they feel like real cinematic experiences. Like, to me, that's what I want out of a lot of films. Like, The Brutalist is the kind of 3.5-hour film that I want. I want something that does feel big and does feel sprawling and does feel larger than life, but is still relatable and still human. And I think The Brutalist captures that really well. That's epic to me. Epic is not, and I made if you guys have checked out on my YouTube channel, Former Film Student, I did all of my 2024 ranked, all the movies that I saw ranked. And I kind of mentioned when talking about The Substance that like cinema is using the visual medium to tell a story and create unique experiences. And films like The Brutalist, that's what cinema is. To me, cinema isn't like Godzilla x Kong New Empire, where Kong gets a power-up glove and Godzilla gets like, he used to have like glow blue and now he got a power-up, so he glows pink and purple, and it's like that's a video game. Yeah. But to each their own. But yeah, all around really great year for movies. I'm excited to see how the 97th Academy Awards turns out. I haven't watched in a year or two. Just, I don't know. I haven't watched since the Will Smith Oscar slap, but we'll see how this year goes. I want to try to see all 10 nominations, but I don't know if I'm going to get to them all. It depends how much time I have and if they make them a little bit more easily viewable, aka bring them to streaming. I'm also not paying $20 to watch Wicked, so if they could just bring that price down, that would be cool. But
yeah, that was my last note I was going to touch on, and I might get hate for this, but I just saw Wicked a couple days ago, and initially when I saw the trailer, I had no interest. I love The Wizard of Oz, and I saw it. I thought the trailer looked horrible. I didn't think it was going to be good. I thought it was just going to be like a big, like, I honestly thought it was going to be a blockbuster flop. I know the play is very popular.
Oh, I never thought it was going to be a flop. That has such a built-in fan base.
Yeah, maybe not. And it also was coming out during the holidays. I feel like, I don't know, that could also help too. Yeah, I guess it does have a big fan base, but I thought it was going to flop in the sense of like critical praise. I did not think it was going to do well critically. So I saw the reviews come out. I was like, oh, all right, maybe it's just going to surprise me. And I then find out it's a part one. So I was like, okay, near 3-hour film, part one. I hope I don't know much about the play. I just know very baseline info. I saw it, and it was kind of like everything I was expecting. I was like, man, it didn't really shock me in any. I saw 10 Oscar noms. I was like, all right, I get if it's gonna get technical stuff, but I don't know. It's again, it's a part one. It's stretched very thin to me, so I just don't see how this is Best Picture worthy compared to even other movies I've seen that, like, I'm not even saying are amazing, but just other movies that are, I think, better. Yeah. Like I saw Furiosa. That's better than Wicked.
I really was hoping that Furiosa would get at least 1 or 2 technical awards, because I really enjoyed that theater experience.
Did it get nothing?
I don't think it got a single thing. I didn't expect it to get a single thing, but I really wanted it to. But that was kind of like my personal. Like, yeah, especially with how much attention Fury Road got back in 2015 when that got nominated. I think that got nominated for Best Picture, right?
It did.
Yeah.
And it got like 6 of them. Like it was getting a lot of technical stuff.
I do think Fury Road is a better film than Furiosa, but I was hoping that Furiosa would still get some kind of award attention, but it's all right.
I know.
It's all right. It's a big, weird, zany blockbuster about a dystopian future with like really weird characters. I'm not surprised it didn't connect with Academy voters this time around, but
I don't know. I think it feels similar to Fury Road. Like it's not on its level.
I think they're two very different films. I think Fury Road is a 2-hour nonstop, high-octane, action-packed thriller. I think Furiosa is much more of a character piece. Like
all the more. All the more. Like it's sure. I don't know.
It's interesting you brought up Wicked, though, because a lot of people I was seeing online through just like social media were really upset that John Chu did not get nominated for Best Director for Wicked. And again, I haven't seen the film myself, so that remains to be seen if I feel like he should have been nominated or not. But I guess we'll see. When the Oscars happen, what wins. Again, I really don't think if Emilia Perez does win Best Picture, I would be very shocked. I think the Academy is at least very aware of the scrutinization that they're getting for this. And I'm not saying that if they feel that it's the best picture winner, that they should back down because of the backlash they've been getting. But I think they're a little bit smarter than that. I'm not giving them too much credit because they've made really terrible choices in the past. But
Yeah.
this isn't even my favorite film of the year. To me, I think The Brutalist should win Best Picture in terms of just craftsmanship, filmmaking. I do think it's the most complete movie of the year. But in my ideal world, The Substance wins Best Picture. And I think it would be the first horror film to win Best Picture, correct?
I always forget if Exorcist actually won.
I know
or
The
not.
Exorcist was nominated. I don't recall if it won.
Let me see.
If it's not the first, it would be the first in a very long time to get
God damn it!
nominated.
It didn't win.
It didn't?
No.
No. Maybe Silence of the Lambs did, but that's still debated on if it's a horror film or not. So,
Yeah, it's not.
yeah, that's fine. I don't really think it is either, but I get why
listen.
someone would consider it one.
I didn't see The Substance, so I cannot speak on it. I feel like I don't want it to be the first horror movie to win Best Picture. Just because
I
of
would.
other ones like The Exorcist, like The Shining, that I feel like are probably better. It would
Probably.
be. I wouldn't want a movie that isn't as good as them to be known as, oh, this is the first horror movie to ever win Best Picture award.
It's almost
Meanwhile,
as
it's
good.
like, really?
I am not joking. I think it's such a phenomenal horror film. I think it's one of the few horror films that actually weirdly has some thematic relevance and some underlying themes. Not even underlying. They're not nuanced or subtle at all. It is very in your face about its themes, but the film just has such a style and a personality to it. It's just so creative in its conception, the packaging, all of it. It's just a very, very innovative horror film in my opinion. But I see your
I missed the
point.
boat
I
on
see your
seeing
point.
it.
I'm telling you, dude, just get a Mubi subscription. But with all of that said, we talked about this for way too long, but that's what we do
Yeah.
here. If you're new to the podcast, we over discuss and over analyze, but that's just how we roll. But what do you think? Should we get into our real topic of discussion today?
Let's do it.
Okay, so moving on from our 2024 Oscars discussion. Also, guys, let us know in the comments if you're listening to this on Spotify. You can leave comments there, or if you're listening on my personal YouTube channel, Former Film Student, where we do upload our episodes on YouTube at least. Let us know in the comments what you guys are thinking about the upcoming Oscars, how you feel about the nominations, what do you think are some of the biggest snubs of the year. We'd love to interact with you guys, so let us know. But all of that aside, let's get into the real meat of this episode. And before we do that, I want to preface with one last thing, and I want to be a little honest with you guys. This is mine and Josh's second attempt at recording this episode. We recorded this a couple weeks back. We try to stockpile our episodes a little bit. That way we don't have to force ourselves to watch 5, 6, 7 movies in 1 week just to get a recording out in time. We don't want to feel that we have to rush ourselves. So we do kind of bank these episodes. But since we're not typically talking about current news, we're just talking about movie franchises from the past, it doesn't feel that it's a wrong thing to do to just kind of bank the episodes. However, when we went to edit the episode for the Before Trilogy, the file to which I had recorded on my end was not there. It had never recorded. The recorder told me it was recording, but when I went to go find the file, it just poof vanished into thin air and was not there. So we are giving this a second shot. So I just want you guys to know, and the main reason I'm bringing it up is because A, I think it's kind of a funny story because I'm a fuck up. And B, I also I wanted to just put that out there because if there's any plot details or scenes or character moments that you guys particularly love in any of these 3 films, and also spoiler alert, we will be talking about all of the films in depth, the scenes, the characters, what happens in the plot, all of that stuff. So if you don't want to be spoiled, please go watch the Before Trilogy and then come back to this episode. But if we do forget something, keep in mind that we already did this recording before, and we may have talked about it on that first recording, and this time it just slipped our minds. So give us a little bit of grace with this one, but we're going to try our best to talk about these films as thoroughly as we can. Starting off in 1995 with Before Sunrise, the first film in the Before Trilogy, all 3 directed by Richard Linklater. And if you guys are unaware, each film was filmed and released 9 years apart. So the first film, 1995, the second film, Before Sunset, 2004, and Before Midnight, the third film in the franchise, 2013. There was a little bit of discussion after Before Midnight about them doing a fourth film, but they have missed their window. They would have had to release it in 2022 to follow that formula. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm pretty solidified in it being just a nice little trilogy. I don't think I need a fourth film.
I feel like everyone said it after the first one. That was so good, I don't need another one. Then the second one's coming out. I was like, okay, just match the quality, and it did. And then they were like, okay, that's really done. And then the third one got announced. It's like, all right, I don't know if you could do it again, and you did. It's like, all right, that's quite enough. That is quite enough.
It kind of pisses me off how well they were able to nail it 3 separate fucking times.
I know.
As a creator and filmmaker myself, I just really admire these movies, like on just an ambitious level. Like they're just so ambitious. And
my man loves his actor's agent on screen. Let me tell you, this guy, he can't get enough of it.
If you guys are unaware, I know I mentioned some of Richard Linklater's other films, but Boyhood was a film that came out in 2014, and he had filmed it over the course of 12 years using the same actors,
if somehow you
including his own daughter. But yeah, so let's cut back to the beginning. We're gonna try to talk about these films in order. But if we do jump around just a little bit, again, forgive us, because talking about 3 films all in one episode can get a little bit muddied up. So going back to 1995, you have the first film in the series, obviously, like mentioned, Before Sunrise, and the film stars Ethan Hawke as Jesse and Julie Delpy as Celine. Jesse is a young American guy, and Celine is a young French woman. They meet on a train. They kind of kick things off and start flirting with each other, and you get this instant connection between the two. And on a whim, a moment of bravery, I'd say, and just confidence through the roof, Ethan Hawke's character Jesse asks Julie Delpy to get off the train and walk around Vienna with him. And that's pretty much what the film is. It is Jesse and Celine just walking around the city of Vienna and getting to know each other and talking to each other. The film is completely just dialogue. And I know a lot of people may be turned off by that if you haven't seen these films and for some reason you're still listening, you don't care about spoilers. Or maybe you saw these films, a couple years ago or in the past and you weren't fond of them at the time. Maybe this will encourage you to rewatch them from, under a different perspective. But sticking just to this first film, is there like another film in the history of cinema where 2 characters have so much chemistry on screen than Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy in this film?
This is definitely up there. I'm trying to think of like other moments of chemistry. I know there's like, I feel like I know like a big one for people. At least I think is a fan favorite is When Harry Met Sally. I don't know if I'd say that's like one of the best.
Not even close to these 2 characters, in my opinion.
No, coming close to this. I
got a good one for you. Neo and Trinity.
That's, you know what? If there's one that rivals it, that could be it. I know a lot of people do like Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca. That's like a big one that's talked about.
That's a fair one.
But this definitely in the modern day, this probably takes the cake. I can't really see another one that really compares. I mean, I could give you some good sources that like, people talk about. Yeah, like even as like we were just talking about Oscar noms, this isn't nominated for anything, nor that I think it should be. But We Live in Time, very good chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh. But
it's so funny that it's so funny that you brought up that film, because I had already brought up my 2024 ranked video. I think in that video, I said when discussing We Live in a Time that the best part about the film is that Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield probably have the best on-screen chemistry I've seen since the Before Trilogy.
Yeah,
I think I made that exact comment. It's great. It's the only good part of the movie.
But yeah, this is like easily top 5 that I've seen.
The thing that I think really stands out, not only about this film, but about the entire trilogy, but in terms of just chemistry, And you get a lot more of it too in the second film, Before Sunset. But with this film, Before Sunrise, they do such a great job at making the conversation and the things that they talk about throughout the film, whether it's serious or they're making jokes, they do such an amazing job at making it all feel so authentic and real. Like, I won't disagree that Humphrey Bogart and Ingmar Bergman in Casablanca don't have great chemistry. But when I watch a film like that, and especially older Hollywood films that feel a little bit more like you're seeing a play that was filmed, you get that with a lot of early Marlon Brando films, like On the Waterfront, where they're great films. They are cinematic classics, as you will, but they still feel a little bit overly dramatic. They feel a little bit, you feel like you're watching two characters. You feel like you're watching a film, even if the performances are stellar. You know, you're talking about Humphrey Bogart, one of the best, Ingmar Bergman, one of the best. Ingrid. Sorry, I'm not. Ingmar.
Could you imagine?
That's the director.
Could you imagine if it was them two?
I think it might be a better movie.
That'd be really progressive for them.
Yeah, for the 1930s or 1940s. Yeah, that'd be way ahead of its time. But no, bringing things back to Before Sunrise is there. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect conversation throughout the film. It's not a perfect romance, even in the first one. And I think there's this big misconception that in the first film, everything is perfect. Everything is just so flowing and easy. And while it does flow so nicely, there are such great little moments where there is a little hiccup. And even before this relationship gets to truly develop and truly blossom, there's little moments, little cracks that you start to see forming. I think of the moment where they run into the palm reader and they both have very different reactions to it. And Celine is very kind of doe-eyed and optimistic about the world. And the first film is easily where her character is the most optimistic. It's where both of them are the most optimistic. It's at a time in their life when the real world hasn't really set in. And that's why this first film feels like such a little fragment of time, this little moment where they've stepped outside of time and they just exist in this moment together. This long, extenuating moment. But I just love it because she takes it very seriously and she loves what the palm reader says. And Ethan Hawke kind of thinks it's a facade. He kind of shits on it a little bit. And it's kind of glossed over until a scene or two later where they're really digging into things a little bit now. And it's a little bit later in the film. And she's like, I forget if it's him or her who brings it up, but the basis is he wants her to tell him something that really pisses her off about him. And she goes back to that moment with the palm reader where she describes him as kind of turning into like a little boy who, because the attention wasn't on him, became kind of a little curmudgeon. And you, right after that scene, like not even right after, during that scene, they're kind of cut off by this poet, this like homeless poet, it seems like, who offers them the opportunity.
Was it before that, or because I can't remember if it was triggered by the poet doing his thing? He writes them a poem with like a random word they give him.
So it's when they're walking down like near the water, and that's when he's like, oh, tell me about the poet, or not the poet. Tell me, or he's like, tell me something that pisses me off or pisses you off about me. And she goes back to the palm reader, and then while they're having that conversation, they're interrupted by the poet. Okay,
because I know after he does his thing, Ethan Hawke he gives his chuckle again, and it's like that pessimism that comes out again. He's like he probably has that already written, you know, predetermined, and he just plugs that word in. And then I couldn't remember from there if that's what stemmed the conversation of like going back to the palm reader. But it might be before. I can't. I may be getting exactly.
But I could have sworn because they get interrupted while they're talking about this. They're getting. I thought they were getting like they were talking about it. Then they get interrupted by the poet. He's like, "Hey, come here. Like, let me write you this poem." But even so, regardless of how or when it happens, I do like both of those scenes because they do start to display kind of little scenes where, you know, not everything is perfect. They're not just two people flirting with each other and it's going over with effortless ease. As they start to talk more and more to each other, they find out little things about each other, little things that maybe they like or they don't like. And a lot of the times you maybe don't get a full explanation on how they feel about it. You just get like a little facial expression. And that's just enough to make things feel really real and personable. And on top of that, just when they're having conversations, it's not your stereotypical poorly filmed dialogue in a movie where one character talks and then cut, the other character talks. There's a lot of interruptions. There's a lot of little moments where little words or syllables or lines feel ad-libbed, and it feels like the characters truly are just speaking their mind and it's not some written dialogue. And how they do it is just so incredibly effortless.
There's a lot of emphasis on reaction to like these dialogue scenes. Like you said, it doesn't just cut to one person talking then the other person talking. It might cut while she's talking and it's him like just looking at her, and you could just see the energy and excitement in his eyes that like, they kind of, he like found something he like cares about. And yeah, what I do like about this is that it honestly does feel very like, it's supposed to feel a little idealized, and that's kind of the stage they are in their life. But it's real in the sense of like I said, there's that moment where they kind of get to that speed bump. I don't really know if there's another one in that movie though. That's kind of like the main one where you kind of get that glimpse of like, they like wince like, oh, I didn't really like this part about you. But
those are the more obvious ones, I'd say. Like those scenes are the more obvious moments, but I also think just like when they're having conversations and they just have these little disagreements, but at the time it's just this, oh, it doesn't matter. These little things don't matter. These kind of tiny little intangibles, they're not as pivotal to our lives right now because they're very young. They're in their early to mid 20s. They have so much of this optimistic view of the world at this point. One kind of moment that I really love with Jesse's character is towards the end of the film, where he's kind of discussing with Celine how he's always felt, and the reason is because I relate to it so much, but he's talking about how growing up he's always felt like he could sacrifice never falling in love and never having children, which is what most people end up doing. He could be fine with not having those things if he could just find something that he could be really good at, because to him, being really good at something that was so singular to him would be more important than just being a good father or a good husband. And obviously, I don't want to get into too much details in the later films, but I think that little moment with him is just really pivotal to his character going forward in the next two films, as it really does start to become a factor. As his life changes, as the complications and the reality of the real world set in. And they have that little great moment towards the end of the film where he has that realization and she's like, what? And he says, I forget exactly, I'm paraphrasing, but the gist is, well, now we're back in reality. That like brief little dream-like scenario that was the last 24 hours, it's gone. We're back in real time. And it just hits you like a ton of bricks, because not everybody, but if you are one of those people who've had those sort of rare but really, really beautiful connections in life with someone, it doesn't even have to be romantic, but just a friend, a family member, maybe romantic, but that true just connection with somebody, and then realizing that it's going to have to end is just, it's a really heartbreaking moment in an otherwise very optimistic and, like you said, idealized film.
I wanted to ask you, like, I don't want to go into like the other films, but is this film better, or would it be as good if it didn't have the other films? Like, if this was just a standalone film, do you think you would view it as highly as you do?
Yes.
Okay. Because I do think the other ones help it in the sense of like this kind of, I feel like if it came out on its own, I think people would also like still kind of like view this as like too idealized, whereas like you see the progression as they get older, so you realize this is just a stage, whereas like if this was just a film on its own, you might just think it ends, well, I mean, we didn't really talk about the ending, but that it ends kind of like very optimistic, and you kind of get this future glimpse of them that they're going to be like this the rest of their lives. So I think, I don't know, I think just like having the sequels puts it into like stages, which I think makes it a little better. I don't know, because
I think it makes it a more unique experience because it would change the way you kind of view the film. Because
that's what I think. Yeah.
If it's a singular film, it's by itself, then you react to that film specifically in a different way the older you get, the more life experience you get. Because if you're 19, 20 years old and say the other two films don't exist and you watch something like Before Sunrise, you watch that film and you're again, say you're 19, 20, 21, you're still young, you're still very wide-eyed and optimistic. Not to say that you can't be optimistic when you're older, but it's just different when you're younger. And I don't think that's like a secret. But you view that film and you're like, wow, like the whole world, I have the whole world ahead of me. I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm still so young. I have all this time to do all these things. Okay, flash forward. Now you're 29, now you're 30. And you watch that film and you watch it and you're like, those two kids have no fucking idea.
Yeah. It might become a little disappointing.
Yeah. And then again, flash forward 10 more years. You're 40. You watch that. Those kids have no fucking idea, right? Like, but now with you having those other two films, you can kind of like, it's because it's so weird because I experienced all three films when I was the age of the characters in the first one. Now I'm almost the age of the characters in the second one. And it's going to be so weird when I'm like 41 and I experience these three movies again, how I'm going to react to all three of them.
Yeah.
It's such a unique trilogy.
It's just interesting because I obviously saw these films. We saw these films when we knew it was a trilogy. I really want to know how this film would have hit if you saw it thinking that was the one and done, you know? Because like you said, the people that might have complaints about this film that say like, oh, it's too perfect, like it's too, like, even if it has those couple scenes, it's too, like, real life isn't like that. But it's not like, they're not trying to say that it's supposed to be perfect. It's just about the energy you feel when you're that young and you have like you have that path ahead of you. So it's just, I don't know.
One of my,
but I think, I think it kind of got assisted by the sequels, and that's not saying the sequels make this a better movie. I just think the overall viewpoint of the movie is a little bit more, like, I don't know.
I do think it's enhanced by its sequels, and I don't think that's a negative. I don't think it's a film like, I think it's a different discussion with a trilogy like the Dark Knight trilogy. I think Batman Begins gets improved upon significantly as a piece of a whole story by its later films. I think The Dark Knight makes it better, and obviously they bring stuff around for The Dark Knight Rises that tie into the first movie. But I think a film like Before Sunrise is so unique in its conception because it completely works as a standalone film. It's still a phenomenal film. And I think the reason it does stand on its own, and the reason I just can't get behind people's complaints that, oh, real life isn't like that, or that's just not realistic, is because so much of the film, they do so much legwork. I'd mentioned earlier how they make everything seem so effortless, and all it takes is sitting down and watching a 10 to 15, maybe 20-minute breakdown video of the behind the scenes of all of these films, and just seeing how much meticulous craftsmanship went on to making everything feeling so effortless. The way that their conversations feel so natural, the way that there's these perfect little interjections, and not even perfect, imperfect interjections where a character will cut the other one off or squeak out a 1 or 2 word little line that, again, you don't know if it's scripted or not, but so much of it you can tell from the behind the scenes stuff that it is meticulous and so well practiced and rehearsed. Like, they sat in the same room for days practicing this stuff.
Those imperfect moments create the perfect, like, dialogue and perfect flow of the movie. Which
brings me back to another video that I was watching kind of before we had started recording, and it's from a channel called Lessons of a Screenplay, or Lessons from a Screenplay. I can't remember the exact title, but he was talking about how when he was in film school, he felt that the second, and I think it's applicable to all three, but he felt that the second Before film, Before Sunset, was a perfect film because of its lack of structure. he has since grown and matured to realize that it's a perfect movie because it has a perfect structure. And I think that's with all three of these films. I think they feel so realistic and natural and genuine, and it's because of the level of craftsmanship, the level of meticulous planning and rehearsing beforehand. And also, it feels like one thing that's great too, and it's actually kind of interesting when you're looking into the kind of behind the scenes trivia about these films, is that Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy were not given screenwriting credits on the first film, but then were subsequently given credit on the preceding two, to which I think actually Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy are now Academy Award nominated screenwriters, because Before Sunset, and it was either Before Sunset or Before Before Midnight, that got them nominated for a Best Original Screenplay, which is really cool. But you go and you look, and apparently Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke had a very heavy hand in a lot of the dialogue and character moments, even in the first film, to the point where Julie Delpy was actually upset for a while that her and Ethan didn't get credit on the first film.
They might have worked on the first one the most, which is funny.
It sounds like literally through all three of the films that they had such a heavy hand in, again, just like the dialogue, how the characters spoke. There's a line in the third one that I'll get to when we're talking about that one that is straight from Julie Delpy, and she's so proud of that moment. And one thing too, though, that I wanted to highlight in terms of behind the scenes trivia, and then obviously whatever positives you have or negatives, you can bring up some negatives, but is when kind of rehearsing these scenes for the first film, Julie Delpy was really concerned that the film was boring, and she kind of conveyed that to Richard Linklater. And she was like, Richard, this film is so boring. You need to get somebody to write some jokes. Like, it's needed to be like funnier. And Richard Linklater said to her, and I think I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, I just spent the last 6 days with you. And if an audience member can, through the 2-hour runtime of this movie, can spend all this time with you and they're bored, then I don't like that person. And I thought that was just like a funny quote, because it's so true when it comes to this film, where I'm never bored. It's genuinely two characters just talking to each other for nearly 2 hours. But it just is, it's entertaining. It's not just artsy fartsy pretentious talk. There are jokes. There are moments of levity where the characters are just laughing or just getting to know each other.
And the thing is, it's okay to have like even pretentious topics and moments, because that is their age right now, where you have these, they talk a lot about the universe and stuff like that, and like what things mean. It's very philosophical. Yeah. This is all stuff also that comes from personal experience from Linklater. Like, this is based on a time that he had in Philly, I think, with this girl that he met, I think in this toy shop. And it played, I mean, I don't know, like what was added that didn't actually happen, but they spent the night together before he left the next day, I think. And so like, that these conversations probably actually happened. It's definitely something that I could see him like kind of talking about, that especially
pulling a lot from his own experience.
Yeah. So, and it's very real. Like I've definitely had these conversations. I've seen people have these conversations, and I've recognized, well, this sounds kind of pretentious, but everyone has those moments. Especially when you're like very youthful, coming out of college, you feel like you just got, all this knowledge handed to, that you learn and handed to you and stuff like that. So you want to like express it. That's what's happening here.
And so one thing I love too is not only do they manage to, and I don't even have to look at my notes, but I remember when we were reviewing these films the first time around for that first recording, but I do remember taking a note that was kind of just me being jealous of Richard Linklater's ability to write dialogue that is or could be seen as pretentious, but make it feel not pretentious at all. Because again, they are talking about these very philosophical subjects, but then also, again, there are those little funny moments. There are moments where they're just joking around with each other, and it's lighthearted, and there is that levity. And even the more serious moments where they're not talking about, I guess, pretentious philosophical subject matter, but making it look very natural. There's also just these great serious moments that are really profound in a lot of different ways. But I think specifically of when Celine takes Jesse to this old cemetery. And is that in the first one or is that in the second one? It's the first one, correct?
That's the first one.
Yeah,
they might go. Do they go? They also go to one in the second one. I know they go into like a little grassy area.
They go into like a garden area, but I think it's the first one. I think it's the first one, but she has this kind of moment where she tells him about this grave and how this specific grave had always stuck with her because it was first off, it was a graveyard full of people who were nameless, I believe, something of that sort. So people didn't know who they were. They didn't have any family or whatnot. And she says that she had always felt connected to this because she was 13 when she found this grave. So she was the exact same age as this girl when she died. And then there's just this little moment between the two where it's just this really kind of somber, sad moment. And the way that Julie Delpy delivers the line is great, but she says something of the sorts of, that girl will always be 13 and now I forget how old they are in this movie, but like early 20s. And it's just this kind of commentary on like, she had this crazy emotional connection to this person who wasn't even alive, who she never knew, because she was just the right age. And now she's much older and that person is still that same age. And again, it could come across as really pretentious, but I think it just really works well with where it's placed in the movie. I think it builds a lot for her character. And they just do that sporadically throughout this movie in so many great scenes. I love the scene of them going into the bar and playing pinball, and it's just this static shot of them as, you know, when one loses, they're having this whole conversation, but when one loses, the other one steps in and starts playing until they lose, and which does come back later too in Before Midnight, but
which I love that we get traced back to that moment.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite moments that Celine has, I really hope I'm remembering it right. It's, I can't remember if it's like after the pinball or if it's even like during the day when it's like the next day, but she talks about the pressures of being like an independent figure of like womanhood in general, and how she's supposed to, like, she's portrayed as this, you know, as such, like very independent, very like mindful of being progressive and stuff like that, and always striving to give like a good name to what a woman is, how powerful a woman can be. But she then talks about I think she like mentions how that she doesn't feel like, no, it's basically about like her desire versus like what her idea is, that she has a responsibility. Basically her responsibility versus like what she can't help long for, which is like to be loved by someone. She's like, I feel like I don't need a man to like, I feel like I shouldn't need a man to complete me. I forget how she words it, but it's about that. Like, I don't want to have this like,
it's kind of the head versus the heart idea, where what you think that you should want isn't always what you want, and what you desire is sometimes not what you think you desire.
I wish I could remember exactly how she words it, but it's a very like heartfelt moment where you like you empathize very much with this person. She's not just some like, you know, she's not cold in any way. She has like a warm heart, and just that's the thing that she wants the most of everything, and she almost feels ashamed of it because she feels like she has other important things to like tend to in life as like, you know, as a woman. But that is like the thing that she desires and wants the most, is just to have someone, to have a man to love and to be loved by. And I just like how that plays later in the films, but that's like one of my favorite moments for her honestly, maybe in the trilogy.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, within the context of all three films, I think it's a really kind of nice starting point for where we meet this character, because obviously in the later films, things get accentuated, and that internal struggle that Celine has between the romantic in her and the realist in her, to where this is the way the world is, this is the way people are, and then on the alternative, you have but this is how things should be. And it's very interesting that you kind of brought that up, because I think it's applicable to one of the video essays that I was kind of watching on this whole trilogy. And it talks about each of the three films and how the first film is what might be, the second film is what could or should be, and the third film is what is. And I think that little moment that you brought up with Celine is so poignant for the entire trilogy, because again, it sets you on this precedent of, okay, and it actually ties into what I brought up with Jesse's character, with both of them are struggling with the two sides of them. Both of them want to be these strong, independent people who, have these profound careers. Jesse wants to be really great at something. Celine wants to change the world. And they both feel like, because they're young go-getters, that this is what they should be doing, that they should be, chasing these dreams. Then there is that part of them that wants that family, that wants that love, that wants that home life, that wants that familiarity. And I think it's great, and it's super relatable for a lot of people viewing these movies, because I mean, I don't know about you, but that's something that I personally have always struggled with. And there's a quote in the second film that I really resonate with at this point in my life, and it's one that a couple years ago I wouldn't have really connected with as much. But again, your life experiences definitely impact how you view art, and I think these three films specifically are ones that, I don't know, they really change, and your perspective on them changes as you grow older and as you just experience more of life. And it'll just be interesting to see, for the rest of however long I'm on this planet, to like how I view them, how you view them, how other people grow with them and change with them. Because the first time I saw these movies, the first one was my favorite, and I don't want to spoil my opinions on the other two, but that is no longer the case. So I don't know. It's interesting that my favorite at the time was the most idealized, sort of surreal one. The most romanticized one is probably the first one. And I saw it when I was young in college at that age. So I don't know. It's just very interesting. We didn't.
These movies, like there are other movies that do this where you can watch them at different stages of your life and they're going to mean something differently to you. But when it happens, it's really great. Like, that a movie can do that. That this trilogy, I mean, it happens. Like Lord of the Rings, it happens with a lot. Like, I've changed my opinion on like my favorite Lord of the Rings, but like this is another one where I'm not looking at you crazy if you tell me any of these three are your favorite, because I get that they're going to mean something differently depending where you are or what you value. Even like I don't know. This is just a constantly evolving trilogy to me. That is like, I don't know. I've already cycled, I feel like, through these. I'm not gonna say which one's my favorite at this point.
We'll save that
I'll
for
try
the
and
end.
wait
But
to the end.
I completely agree with that sentiment, and I think just what's the most interesting about this trilogy, and I still have to, I think we'll do it for this podcast at some point, the Three Colors trilogy, but this is the only trilogy as of right now that I've seen where my actual life experiences change my viewing of these movies and change how I feel about them. Lord of the Rings, I've also changed, but that's usually because, I've grown a little older and, I just prefer this one more. I think this one has a better pacing.
I appreciate this element.
It's not because I'm a certain age or I'm a little older. A little sometimes, because like I feel like when I was a kid, it's bringing up Lord of the Rings, Return of the King was my favorite. And then when I was in college, it was Two Towers, and now I'm a Fellowship guy. And it's all, I don't know. But it's never because I'm like a different age. Yeah. It's always just, like you said, I'm appreciating a different element. But I'm down to move on to the second film unless we have any more thoughts. If we want to talk about a little bit more specific stuff.
We can always trace back.
I do want to just talk about... Well, one thing I forgot to mention, and I was mad that I didn't mention this when we did that initial recording, I kind of love that little interaction they have at the beginning when they first get off the train with those two strange guys on that little bridge, and they invite them to the play. And, it's just a funny little interaction. And one thing that all three of these films do extremely well is they use the locations to perfection. You feel like you just get such a nice aesthetic and consistency, and they really feel like they explore these locations thoroughly in just a really great way through visuals and whatnot. But I love that little interaction on the bridge with them. And then later on in the film, towards the end, they're like, "Oh man, we're not gonna make that guy's play, huh?" It's like, you were never going to that play. But I love the scene in the park when they have sex. It's very romantic. It's very sweet. I like how she toys with him a little bit, where she says, "Oh, when I first, met you on the train, I was gonna sleep with you, but now like I've fallen for you so much, I don't want to." And I don't know. I like she's just toying with him, but it's all it's very sweet. It's very romantic, and then the sun rises and.
Quick mention of the record shop scene, because I forgot to talk about that. That's just like such a minimalist scene that just works so well, and the amount of tension in that room, in that booth,
the sexual
is just
tension
insane.
Is ridiculous,
and they're just listening. Yeah, and just like I love just the back and forth of looking away as soon as the other one looks, and that's just like a really. Just such a small scene that feels so important. It's in that
the way like you said, the little looks, the way that they don't even have to say a word when they're in that listening booth together and they're listening to that record. It's just so. And again, in so many other movies, I don't know what it is, but I would see a scene like that and I would just be like, yeah, that's really cheesy. Like that's really, I don't know. It's I don't buy it. But in this film, you just buy it, and it goes back to.
I don't know how. I don't know how it happens like that, because this, like you said, it could be very cringy, but it just isn't.
It's very sweet. It's played up really well, and I think it's just A, execution, but B, it's the execution. B, it's that chemistry. Again, the way that they're able to just that sexual chemistry between the two of them without even saying a word. Because, why have just good chemistry between characters when you could have, a character say a line like, "I don't make love, I fuck hard." That's a little throwback to our 50 Shades of Grey episode, which check out if you haven't. It's a good one. But no, yeah, again, I love that record shop scene. But perhaps the most heart-pounding scene of the film, and maybe of the whole trilogy, is the final scene. And I don't know if we mentioned this plot detail, but Jesse's character, he has a flight the next day. So he asks her to walk around Vienna with him until his flight the next day. Or he has to catch a train or something. You're right. It's the first one. It's a train. He has to catch a train. And they do this great little moment the night before they even make love in the park. And it's where she gets really sad. She gets really somber, and they're having dinner together near the waterfront, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful location, and she gets really sad, and he's like, "Well, what's wrong?" And she kind of just tells him how it's going to end. Like, we're going to have to say goodbye to each other eventually. And then you, as an audience member, you get super somber. But then Jesse's like, "Well, why don't we just say goodbye now?" And in the moment, you're like, "Oh, that's great." But then you actually get to the scene where they actually have to say goodbye, and they choose not to write down each other's information. They don't choose to even learn each other's last name.
Pisses me off.
Again, it goes back to that like optimism, right? They're young, they're dumb, they're optimistic, and they make this plan to visit at this exact train station 6 months from now.
Listen, this is a very tiny nitpick on a movie I love, but this just bothers me more and more when I watch it, because like I'm putting myself in their shoes. I get feeling optimistic that you're just gonna keep your word and meet up in 6 months. I don't care. I might just want to talk to you. I might just want to like give you a call like halfway through, and just maybe I'm gonna ask for the number. I've already had this incredible night. I don't feel scared to ask for the digits. I'm asking for that damn number. I'm at least asking for the last name. What the hell's your last name? Because
I get it, but I don't think it's a criticism, because you're putting yourself in that situation. That's what you would do. I don't think that's what these. I don't think that.
I believe that they.
I think they're too.
I
think they're too
would.
optimistic. I think they're both too idealized, and they see the world through this kind of, this rose-tinted glasses where there's still so much ahead of them. And that's kind of it. But like going back to the scene itself, your heart is just, at least for me, your heart is just like pounding as the train is getting closer and closer, and you can hear it. And there's this great little moment when they're before they settle on meeting there 6 months from now, where she says something, I forget the exact amount of time, but she's like 5 years, and he's like 5 years. Wait, that's a really long time. And there's just that.
That's a funny part.
They settle on 6 months.
He like he agrees to it like immediately because he just wants to like meet with her, and he's just like,
there's that like brief moment where he's like, okay, and then wait, no, that's so long, and it's even and then it cuts back to her angle, and she has the same reaction to her own suggestion where she's like, wait, that's way too long, and it's just this funny little moment, but. There's just so many great little moments in that. I love, I don't know how, this is another one that I could totally see coming across as really cheesy, and this is the last scene I want to talk about at least, and if you have anything more, go right ahead, but I love the scene where they are they're still in the bar, and it might have been after the pinball, but they do the little telephone thing. And it's them talking to their friend about meeting the other one. And it again, it could come across as way too cutesy, way too cringe, but Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, they just sell it. And I think, again, so much of that just comes down to they helped write these characters. They helped bring these characters to life. Richard Linklater is a really talented filmmaker and writer, but it's really that chemistry, and it's really just them adding that into the characters. I think even in one of the behind the scenes thing that I saw, Julie Delpy is the one who did the ring thing. Like, that wasn't in the script. Like, she added that little tidbit, but it just adds that little personality to her character.
Yeah. And it's just a unique take on like just telling the person how you feel rather than like just be so blunt and just obvious about it. It's just a interesting way to do it that I really haven't. I don't think I've seen that before. So just those little details that just make it more of an interesting love story.
Not as good as Twilight.
But that's a good. No, not quite, but it's
There's no vampires or werewolves in this, so that's a disadvantage.
That's a good scene to end on because that's like one of my favorites in the movie. I'm ready to kind of dive into the second one and maybe talk about something if it pops in my head from the first.
I think we did a pretty good job of that kind of talking about the first one. All right, guys, thank you for that little commercial break. We are back now. Moving on to the second film in the Before Trilogy, and that is Before Sunset, as mentioned, released in 2004. I also forgot to mention, guys, when discussing the first film, I forgot to mention its budget. It was made for around $2.5 million and made $22.5 million at the global box office. And this is off memory. I didn't write this one down, but I'm pretty sure the first film has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critic score. I don't know what the audience score is, but I don't know. Josh can fact check me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah.
All right. But moving on to the second one, kind of setting the stage, again, directed by Richard Linklater, and he would go on to direct Before Midnight. It is his trilogy. This time, as mentioned, though, Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke both given credit for the writing in the film, as they were, again, very instrumental and pivotal in kind of bringing these characters to life and really giving them the personalities that they have. This one was made for $2.7 million and made only $15.8 million at the global box office. So it made a couple $1 million less than the first one, but you know what? I kind of get it. The first film is like an indie film, and just imagine if they made like a Whiplash 2. Like, it'd feel weird.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people saw the first film and kind of took it as, oh, we're not getting a sequel. Like, the ending is ambiguous. You're supposed to wonder if they got together or not, and you're never supposed to know. But kind of setting up the plot for the second film, it takes place, like I said in the first part of the episode, that it takes place 9 years after the first film, so set in 2004. And this time is set in Paris, France, as Jesse has written a book about his meeting with Celine, and it became very famous. The book was huge. He became a pretty popular author and was now doing a book tour where he was doing a signing / little interview in this little cafe in Paris, or this little, I think it's a little bookstore in Paris. And as he's giving this little conference and this, doing this little book tour thing, who shows up but Celine? And we'll talk a little bit more about the plot, obviously, and break down the scenes and stuff. But one crucial piece of information is that Jesse and Celine ended up not being able to meet 6 months later at the train station in Vienna. That's a crucial part of the plot. Again, we're going to be spoiling the rest of it, but that kind of sets the stage for the dynamic and the conversations that'll follow in the rest of the film. And I love this film. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think firmly in my top 30. I'm not sure where. I'd have to check Letterboxd, but how do you feel about Before Sunset?
Well, so let's do the fact check. First off, Before Sunrise does have 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. Should I
do you have the second one up? Can I guess?
Include what?
Oh, this is what we should start doing if I don't know it. Let me guess the Rotten Tomatoes scores. 98 critic score. Oh, what is it? Ooh,
94.
That is criminally low. Oh, can I guess the audience score?
Right? Yeah.
85.
Go ahead.
Ah.
Nope.
Huh?
Higher.
Ooh, let's go. 90. Ooh,
91.
Let's go. All right, I love it.
91.
Good kind of. You don't see a lot of critic and audience scores that kind of close these days. So good on this movie, pleasing everybody. A real crowd pleaser. But yeah,
it's interesting though. Interesting that because like this one is very highly regarded. Probably as like I've probably seen this one at the top of
it's most
people's
people's
most,
favorites.
I think. Yeah. So very interesting to see the lowest critic score. Well, in terms of the first two, I'm not going to tell you what Before Midnight is yet.
Yeah, I want to guess that one too.
Yeah, no, I love this movie. I first saw these just a year ago. And I probably watched the trilogy like 3 or 4 times.
Can I ask
last
you,
year.
the first time you watched the films, like, did you know the plot of each of them, or so I want to know at the end of the first film, before you watched the second one for the first time, did you think that they met in Vienna 6 months later?
I thought they might have, yeah.
Not might have. Did you think they did, or did you think they didn't? I'm curious.
Okay. I'm gonna say yeah.
Interesting.
No, actually, no. I changed my mind. No, because that's a very hard thing to do.
Incredibly.
When you give such vague instructions, you don't have the number. So no, I don't actually think they did. But to answer your question, no, I really had no idea, like, at all the plots of these. I kind of went into them. I'm amazed that I avoided any kind of like spoilers for these. Spoilers even like telling me what the plot was. Like, I didn't know the second one. Like, in my head, I'm questioning, I wonder how they meet up. I have no idea where she shows up. I don't even know that she shows up. I don't know that he's an author. Like, I have no idea anything. So it was very nice going into these completely blind.
This is kind of a perfect...
And then just getting smacked in the face by all the shit that
absolutely. And I'm excited to unpack all of that. But it's kind of a perfect segue into the opening of this film. Because as mentioned, Jesse is doing this little... he's finishing up this book tour, and he's doing this little kind of meet and greet at this little bookstore in Paris. And as mentioned, the book that he wrote is about his day and night with Celine, the kind of magical moment in his life, this little brief getaway from time and the world. And when he's describing the book, you have these little flashbacks to the first film, and they're very brief. They're like 1, maybe 2 second shots as he's discussing it. And then it does this perfect match cut, because he's talking about Celine, and he's talking about having this connection with somebody. And it shows the shot of her from the first film. And then it does a perfect match cut, and boom, there she is, standing in the store.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, you're like you're like, it's like jarring for a second. It's
Yeah.
like, wait, because you're not expecting it to just her to just show up at his like book tour.
It's just so perfectly edited, but the emotional, I just remember not only the most recent time I watched it, but the first time watching it, just that like it like almost gets your heart pumping. Like the second she shows up, and you're right, for a second you're like, it's so jarring, but you question for like a millisecond, is that actually her? And then Ethan sees her.
I feel like I almost thought it was a
you think
vision.
Like
I didn't think it was
like,
actually,
you know,
but I was like, no, it's got to be. Like I gotta. It's a movie about them. I got to see like how.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, there's so much excitement because you're just like, okay, don't let her get away. Now we can reconvene. Like, because you don't know he's married either.
I wanted to bring that up because you don't know that he's married or has a kid for like a good portion of the movie. They are.
Yeah, it wasn't the boat, right? Like, is it the boat? He talks about it before.
Why
right?
can't I
She
remember?
eventually asks
Let me
him.
check my notes real quick to see if I have it in there. I might have like wrote down the actual timestamp, but no, it's on the boat because I wrote the boat scene is so amazing and
Oh, it is the
sad,
boat.
and then my next note is them revealing he's married and has a kid so late in the movie hurts my soul, and it really does because again, it's one of those. What do they call that? The 4x1 race, the 4x100 race in the Olympics when, you know, you hand the baton off. That's like the first movie into the second movie in terms of their chemistry and the two characters' dynamic. Because first off, I couldn't go without highlighting just the genuinely great reaction Ethan Hawke has when he sees her appear in the bookstore. Because again, it's like you and him, like you as the audience member and him as the character are experiencing that same level of excitement and just bewilderment because you can't believe it's her. And I just love how they handle that. And, you know, Ethan Hawke gives such a great little physical acting performance there because it catches him so off guard, and he's like mid-sentence as he's describing this woman, and boom, she appears. It's almost mythical in a way, but I absolutely love it. But yeah, like the way that because he sees her and then he, you know, talks to his agent and he's like, oh, listen, I'll make my flight. I got, you know, I'm just going to go walk around with her for a little bit. And they go off walking, and it's almost like they pick up right where they left off. And it's obviously not as late into the film as them revealing that he has a wife and child, but they kind of hold off on revealing whether or not they ended up meeting in Vienna. Obviously, you know that they don't, but you come to find out why and what happened. And it just hurts your soul. Because what you come to find out is Julie Delpy's character, Celine, her grandmother passed away, and she was very close to her grandmother, and it happened right around the time that she was supposed to go meet him. The funeral was literally the day that they had agreed to meet with each other. But Ethan Hawke's Jesse did go to Vienna 6 months later at the train station. She wasn't there. And he even stayed there a couple of days, and I think he said he ended up owing his dad like $2,000 when he got back to the States. And
Yeah.
it's so heartbreaking because what's great too is he plays it off at first like he didn't go, as to not make her feel bad. And it's her fault because she goes, I forget, they're having a little conversation and she kind of brings up, wait a minute, my grandmother died. I really wanted to be there. Why weren't you there? And he just has this look, and then you and her realize, oh no, he was there. And it's just so, you just feel so bad for the guy because I just can't imagine. That's like second below getting left at the altar in terms of like painful things. But
yeah, because he even made like signs, so everyone probably sees him look like
he probably looks like a
all pathetic
lunatic,
and
putting up
shit,
signs
like,
of a French woman he
Yeah.
met 6 months ago. Like I like, it's crazy. But yeah, again, I just love that kind of effortless baton passing, the way that Jesse and Celine just sort of pick up, and they have, again, that same energy, that same just chemistry and charm about each other. But now it's 9 years later, and they've lived so much more of life. And it kind of leads more into my thoughts on the third film, but I saw someone on Reddit a while back describe the second and third film and talking about Jesse and Celine as saying, I think Jesse and Celine get more interesting as characters when they've experienced more of life. And I just happen to really agree with that. Like, no, I don't want to give too much spoilers into how I'm going to kind of rank all three films and their ratings, But I do agree that I just think Celine and Jesse, because they still have those great philosophical conversations, now they're just having them under the lens of 9 years more life experience. And they're just vastly more interesting people because of it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they obviously mature, so they become more grounded in their realism. It's not as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just, it's not as like wandering. If like the first one, that is just a lot of like wandering thoughts, but this one you get like real life experiences. It feels more like you're starting to get more into like the heartbreaking parts of like life and stuff like that. And you get more of that as like in the middle of this film, when you start seeing where they're coming from in these 9 years, what they've experienced, where Jesse is in his life. And it just puts this like umbrella of just a next level emotion. So
no, I love how they slowly kind of lower the veil in this film, because when they first meet, it is kind of like seeing somebody that you haven't seen, like seeing an old friend that you haven't spoken to in years. And it's that very, again, they do have that chemistry, but it's that kind of familiarities. It's that, oh, how are you? Hi, how have you been? Like, what's life been like? How's your career? How's your love life? All of that stuff. Which, again, they do hold off on Jesse with that stuff for a good amount of time, but you do get it eventually in the film. But at the beginning, it is all those formalities, and then just as the film progresses and the characters just start talking more and more, I do agree with your sentiment that the thoughts in the first one were a little more scattered. And again, I do think that leads to that just less life experience, you know. They are 9 years older. So they just see things through a different, more mature lens now. But there is still those, they even managed to weave in those moments that I loved in the first one. And I love it because, excuse me, when they're walking through, you had mentioned the garden, when they're walking through the garden, I think you had mentioned it when we were talking about the first one. And they have this concept of like, oh, like, what would you do if the world was ending and we were going to die tonight? And he says, no, I would stop talking about my book and I would just keep wanting to talk to you in between sessions of us making love for hours upon hours. And she makes this kind of funny little remark where she's like, oh, well, why wait to go to the hotel? Why not just on the bench right here? And then again, it is like sort of like an intentionally, this one I think is intentionally cringy and uncomfortable because he like grabs her, not in like an aggressive way, in like a playful way, but he like kind of grabs her and pulls her over and puts like sits her on his lap on the bench. And she like hops off and you can see she gets a little uncomfortable and she gets a little shy for a moment. And she's like, no, we're not dying tonight. He's like, yeah, sorry, that was a, bad example. And there is that little uncomfortable moment, kind of like in the first one with the palm reader or the poet, where again, it's not just these perfect scenes of them flirting and having all these deep philosophical discussions. There are times, and especially towards the second half of the film, where things get very serious and they get very emotional, and you just don't really get that in the first one. Like, you get moments of levity, you get some, I guess, deeper, more emotional moments, but in this one, because again, the characters have lived so much more time in the world, they just have so much more to talk about. I want to bring this scene up, but the car scene towards the end of the film, when Jesse and Celine are in the car, and it's a little bit after the boat ride, and they're going back to, I believe, her apartment to drop her off.
Yeah, let's just jump right into the puddle of tears. A bunch of
I think it's obviously the best scene in the film, or at least the one that there's the most
highlight of
the
movie.
But for starters, Celine just sort of has this breakdown, and it's so well handled, because one thing all three of these films do so well, and again, I saw a great video essay about it, more in regards to a scene in the third one that I can't wait to discuss, but in just like the ups and downs of a conversation. There's never just one static growing emotion in any of the scenes in these films. It's always an up and down. Tensions will raise a little bit, whether it's sexual, emotional, the tensions will raise a little bit, and then it'll die down a little bit, and then it'll raise up a little bit more, and then it'll die down. And it's just such a good up and down. I don't know. It just carries the film in a really great way.
I'm very excited to talk about that, because I remember when we recorded this, I watched a video that spoke exactly about that, and the third one displays it so well, but I can't focus on it.
Let me ask you real quick. Did they use the graph to like show you? Yes. Okay. So we watched the same one.
They compared it. They compared it to La La Land.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that when we talk about the third one more. But
it happens. It does happen in this. Well,
no,
actually,
it does.
No.
It does because
in this one as much?
Especially in this scene in the car, because again, Julie Delpy. The scene doesn't start out super dramatic, but it kind of it comes up, and Julie Delpy goes into this. I don't want to say monologue, but she goes into this long kind of spiel about how ever since that night with Jesse, she has been unable to fall in love with another man, and she feels like she can't be romantic anymore, and that all of her aspirations and her ability to love somebody and be loved, she put all of that energy into that one night with him, and she hasn't been the same since. And I think that's really interesting because you brought up earlier like how the sequels changed the context of the first film, and I think for more ways than one, because now that entire first movie is recontextualized, because for 9 years since, it has completely fucked her up and made her unable to love somebody. And sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, no, I was gonna say, so like this is kind of, I wanted to talk about character transitions between the first, the second, and we'll go into the third. But because in the first one, I talked about one of my favorite moments of her, where she talks about her desires of being, a romantic. That's like her most important thing. She shifts the most. Like I'm not saying she's affected more emotionally, because Jesse obviously has his that he dives into in the car as well. You don't realize it's just her that struggled, but he's more pessimistic in the first one. We kind of we've deduced. So does he get more pessimistic as the movies go on as well? Because it's almost like there's still hope. There's a lot of hope within them in the first one, but there's a scene earlier. I'm gonna kind of like jump around a little bit, where she gets very very intense politically. Like that's kind of like her thing right now with like her career and stuff like that. She's kind of more hardened a little bit on like the realities of life and like the cruelties that she's experienced. So it's not as optimistic as it used to be. But Jesse kind of seems a little bit more like he sees like the brighter sides to life. He recognizes where it's bad, but he almost looks happier mentally, maybe. I'm wondering if they both get more pessimistic, or if Jesse kind of like stays kind of like at an even level. Because the first one, he's as much hope as there is in terms of like being like love and stuff like that, he's very pessimistic, as we see with the poet, the palm reader. It's like it's almost like he can't just like let go and just like kind of just enjoy the like moments that
I think it's funny
enjoying.
Because I think after seeing these films a couple of times now, I genuinely believe that she gets more pessimistic as the films go along, and he gets more optimistic, but not in a healthy way. Like both of them,
that's kind of
both
what I'm
of them
like
get
thinking.
to an unhealthy level in the opposite direction. Whereas I feel like, in this film and by the third film, she has let a lot of these things affect her in a deep way that has truly changed her life perspective and has kind of just muddied up that optimism she used to have. Whereas Jesse in the first one, he has this kind of line, and I don't think we really talked about it, but he says in regard to his parents, like they're two people that don't really like each other, but they stay together for him or whatever. And he kind of goes into this little monologue about how he's not sad about it, and he just feels like someone who wasn't supposed to be born, but he's fine with that because he feels like he chooses his own destiny in a way. And it's very kind of prophetic in a way. But again, he does have more of those cynicism moments. But Celine in that first one, again, very wide-eyed, very optimistic about a lot of the stuff. The palm reader. But progressively, because again of her life experience, again, like you said, she gets more political in the second one, and by the third one, it's her career, politics, and family life, and all of that kind of really just weighing her down. But she grows more pessimistic as the films get along. Jesse gets optimistic, but he does so in a way where he kind of just ignores things. Jesse's problem
Yeah.
is he doesn't really want to deal with reality, and that optimism sometimes blinds him to the truth of things, to where he's fine. He seems very passive aggressive, as more passive aggressive, at least as the films go along, in my opinion.
He's usually has like the more condescending tones, and that's played a lot in the third one. I do want to talk about how,
but I think even in the first one, he's kind of condescending, right? Like, it's not just enough for him to be like, I don't really believe in that sort of stuff, but he does kind of talk down and treat Celine in a way of where, like, oh, I can't really believe that you buy into that stuff. Like, can't you see how it's an obvious facade? And he kind of belittles her, not super harshly, but in a very, again, like, condescending kind of way.
No, yeah, I agree. It's always there. You always get hints of it. And he does like these little chuckles kind of like at the person, but playfully, but it comes off like
passive aggressive. Yeah.
You know, you're like,
yeah.
Yeah. But Celine, so the reason I love that moment in the first is because now we're starting to see it in this one. We see it very much in the third. Why she shifts so much is because of how intense she is in the first one about that idea of love. And I really don't want to spoil too much in the third, but it seems like, you know, every few years that goes by with this 9-year gap from the first to the second movie, she's been increasingly let down. And now, you know, she's seeing Jesse married. She doesn't really know the extent of it. She just sees that he's married, and she's not. She's never even been asked, at what she talks about in the car. I think that's why she becomes like more like cynical, and like almost like Jesse is kind of like more like level-headed, you know, in terms of like his speech, not really mentally. Like he's still there's still.
I think
like,
his biggest
mentally.
problem, and again, we're kind of leaning more into the third one, but I think his biggest problem is, and they bring it up in, you know, obviously the scene of the third one, but he always feels like he's the only person in a situation who is keeping a level head. Everyone else is emotional and overreacting. And I think with Jesse, the problem is he treats emotional situations without emotion. Like, he tries to remove emotion out of a lot of scenarios that require it. And I just think that's him, again, being a little condescending, a little passive aggressive. And it wasn't until this kind of viewing where I was like, because when I first watched them, I was like, yeah, well, like, you know, by the second and third film, like, Julie Delpy gets really intense with a lot of stuff, and she is kind of quick tempered, but, you know, oh, Ethan Hawke, he does kind of keep a level head. And I was kind of on that train, but then this kind of recent viewing, I was like, you know, he is just kind of, he just doesn't want to address things. He does and he doesn't. And again, he does so in such a passive aggressive way where it's like, oh, I want to talk about this, but I'm too afraid to talk about this. And he just kind of lets little things slide, little comments, little remarks.
We'll definitely get more into it when we get to it, because I'm interested, because I almost like, I feel like I don't really agree fully, but I want to see what you notice on this. Yeah, for sure.
So let's return to the second one. But I do love, you know, returning to that car scene where she does have this kind of just emotional breakdown, and that's where she brings up the whole, you know, I just don't feel like I can love anybody anymore thing. And Ethan Hawke, you know, the way that he kind of gets her to calm down a little bit is just flat out talking about how awful his life is. He says something along the lines of, my life is 24/7 bad. And he talks about how he likes his wife and knows that she's a good mom, but he's just not in love with her and never has been. And that's where you kind of get more details about how they weren't even married when she got pregnant, and how he kind of married her because, you know, because of the child, and he's just in a loveless marriage. And then again, that's when things are starting to simmer down emotionally. But then as he starts to rev up, he starts to bring up all these emotions that he has. And he brings up this dream that he has where they're lying together in bed and she's naked and he just touches her belly and she's pregnant. And you realize this guy's life is terrible too. He's let that one night ruin himself too, because now he's in a loveless marriage, and sure, he loves his kid. And I do really love, and I do want to bring this up now because I know I'll forget, but the one kind of moment that now as an adult, a couple years later, and different changes in my life, obviously I don't have any kids, but since having a niece and nephew, the line where Jesse kind of says that he sees his child and he knows that he doesn't want to miss a single moment of their life. it just has really resonated with me now after having a niece and nephew, because I feel like I just relate to it more, to where I'm like, damn, I know I'm going to miss things because, unfortunately, don't want to get into too many details, obviously, but family moving possibly in the near future, and I know it'll just be realistically harder to see my niece and nephew. Obviously, FaceTime and stuff is cool, but scenes like that now are just hitting me harder, because it's like, oh, damn, I don't want to miss a moment of those kids' lives. They're such genuinely great little kids, and I just want to be there for all the birthdays and all the big steps and big moments of their life. And so that line, again, is one that just kind of harkening back to our earlier discussion about just us have lived more life now and viewing them. Things change, new life experiences altering how I view the movie, because now that scene, just that line of dialogue just hits so much harder. And yeah, it's just, again, they do such a great job of characterization in this film, just adding so many more layers and depths to both characters, both, you know, I don't know. There's so much to talk about, but forgive me, you know, is there anything that you want to, you know, scenes that you want to talk about, lines of dialogue, or?
Well, I was going to say, you think you're ever going to watch this with Noah?
Oh, damn. That might take some time. Maybe when he's like 17, 18.
I was gonna say 7.
No, this is not, I don't think a 7-year-old is gonna sit through a movie of people just talking. Right now he's just big into like animated monster trucks. So,
I want to rewind a little bit to the boat scene, because I love when you see Jesse. He's just like he just randomly just says, "Why couldn't you have just been there in Vienna?" Like, obviously understands the situation, but I love that she just brings up how maybe he's idealizing her. Maybe it's better we didn't, because we wouldn't have this moment right now, because we would have maybe gotten sick of each other and just stuff like that. Like, because that happens so often, where you only get a glimpse of someone and they're so perfect until you get to know them more. You know, there's things about a person you might not like, which I can't remember if Celine says it in the first or second one, where she loves all those little like details. Is it this one that she says it? She's like, I feel like I'll fall in love with a person more by those things that people.
I
might
think that's
get
the first
tired
one,
of.
because that just inherently sounds more idealized and how she would sound more in the first one. Like,
Okay, I want to remember that when we go to the third one. I want to remember a lot.
One
of these
thing that we should both
when we get to the
remember
third
that we
movie.
didn't really mention is that the first film, the whole reason that Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke start talking in that movie is they're discussing a German older couple who's arguing.
Yeah.
And so we'll circle back. But no, I love too, and we haven't really talked about much of the technical aspects. And I could see how surface level someone might be like, yeah, it's kind of boring, you know, in terms of the visuals, but I do think they do such a great job of just letting each and every scene breathe. It's a lot of just wide 2 shots of, you know, Celine and Jesse talking. Obviously that's what the movies are about, but I love Richard Linklater's ability to just trust the actors. And obviously, again, it just goes back to spending so much time in small little hotel rooms, working with these 2 actors, making sure every conversation is, you know, finely tuned and feels genuine and natural and honest. But just letting the film breathe. You know, we didn't really talk about the length, but it's an 1-20-minute film, the second one. I think the first one clocks in a little over 1:50 or something of that sorts. But the second one is super breezy and it flies by, again, just because of the chemistry and the ease of the conversations. But when you're in certain moments, it feels like you're there for an eternity. Like, you know, the scene in the car, like the boat scene. Like, you hear it in his voice. You brought up that scene where he's like on the boat, where he's like, why couldn't you just be there in Vienna? And you just, again, coming from a place of understanding, but also you just hear that pain in his voice. Like, he knows why, but it just kills him because of all the shit.
Yeah. Because he's just like imagining a world where maybe her grandma died a week prior, anything. But I want to talk about, because this is a huge thing in the movie that is just present constantly in this hour 20 is the consistently beating clock. And you get it the most. I get in the first one, you're like, it's before sunrise, you're waiting for the sunrise to happen. But this one feels even more apparent because they only have like an hour before his flight. And I don't know if you know this, but there's I think the clocks in Italy, they every hour, like a clock will usually like do its
a little
chime
ding
and ring for a little bit. In Italy, they have clocks, I think, that go every 15 minutes. My parents have one, and it's really fucking annoying
terrible.
that they leave it on. So every 15 minutes, it is terrible. And usually when it gets to the hour, whatever number it is, that's how much it dings. It's fucking annoying. But this movie feels like that kind of clock. You're getting it like it's like every 15 minutes, you're just getting her as like that bell to remind him, don't you have a flight? You have like a flight to get to. We have to like stop. He's like, no. I still have time. And it's like another 20 minutes go by, and she's like, no, we can't go on the boat ride. You have to get to your flight. I'm gonna be sick. And it's just like he's like pleading with her, just like, let me handle my flight. Don't you worry about it. And you're just like, man, how is this, like, just the stakes just increase, and you're just like, you just feel constant tension, and you're just getting stressed, just in the most hopeful way. So I just love that is just like in like every sequence. They're just getting like a constant alarm pretty much.
For films that, obviously in the title you have a time of day, you have sunrise, midnight, sunset, all that stuff. But for there to always seem to be, at least in the first two, in the third film, there's sort of a different ticking clock, but more metaphorical, if you get what I'm saying. But in the second one, in the first one, there being like a literal time frame. Like they only have so much time until his train the next day. They only have an hour till his flight. The increasing shortening of that time, like you said, it just adds so much tension to where not only is the film breezy because of those conversations flowing so effortlessly, but now you have this added layer of like, oh, there's this time crunch, and you're getting more and more stressed because you don't know. He has a wife, he has a kid, and if you haven't seen the third film yet, you're watching this as the scenes unfold, and you're like, when's the time going to be where she says you're going to miss your flight, and he goes to his flight, and they say goodbye, and they go their separate ways, and you just keep watching, and you keep watching, and you're like, again, like you said, you're getting so stressed out. And then towards the second half of the film, towards the end, when they do start to have these emotional breakdowns, and they talk about how much they think about each other, and they think about that day, and you're like, please, for the love of God, just get together. And then you finally get to that scene. And I think for everybody watching the film, the second you know that where it's going to end is when they get to her apartment and he doesn't go back to the car and he goes upstairs. I think at that moment, at least for me, that's where I'm like, this is going to do it, huh? This is going to be it. This is going to be that satisfaction.
I was also just unaware of the time. I was never checking the time frame of the movie. So I think I just forgot. Maybe it was an hour 20. So I wasn't like, I was like, so much has to happen right now. And I'm just like we got to address this flight that keeps getting like talked about. We got to address this family that keeps getting mentioned. And then you get that, you just get that satisfying
the ultimate payoff. And
end.
It's like, it's so weird talking about like a payoff in a film like this. Like it feels like a weird word, but that's the way you can describe it. It's you feel so satisfied.
I will say, when I first watched it, as I thought this was fantastic. I still wasn't expecting the fade to black. So when it happened, I was like, oh shit, is the movie over? It's over already? And like, I couldn't tell if I was like upset because I wanted to see more, or I was like, or should I just be happy that I got what I wanted? I don't know if I was just like, I was
it comes
like
out of
very,
not nowhere,
I was just
but
shocked.
It does hit you like a ton of bricks.
It feels, it kind of did feel out of nowhere because it's like, it just fades as she's like in the middle of like singing a song.
She's doing her little dance. But what I love is just those final moments before it fades to black, where it's just him watching her dance, and you just I don't think a character has ever looked more in love on screen than in that moment and in that scene between those two. But he's just watching her do this dance, and it's right after she played him this song that she wrote. And Julie Delpy has such a lovely little voice, and she's playing this little kind of simple guitar tune, but this beautiful song that she obviously wrote about Jesse. And there's like this nice little callback to the first film with the poet, where he kind of brings up like, oh, that's probably just a song that you wrote, and you just plug each guy you bring up here's name into it. And it's just this nice little callback, but not in like a super overly cheesy way. This isn't, a Marvel movie, but no, it's just so lovely. I don't think there's another way to describe it. It's just such a beautiful ending to the film. And she does this little song for him, and then it kind of, he puts on this record, and she talks about, like, asks him like, oh, did you ever see her in concert? And he goes, no. And she says, oh, I did. And she goes into this little spiel while she's doing this dance, and he just sits down and he's watching her with just these eyes, and she's dancing, and she just has this little line, and it's just, you're gonna miss your flight. And a couple more seconds of his look, and boom, it just ends.
Well, he says, I know, and then he just like, he just continues
I
to
know
watch her dance.
It's just so great. I don't know. I think you'd have to be a really hardened, cold, callous person to not love this ending. I know, like, I'm the first person to love a super depressing, fuck you audience ending. I love when shit is dark and dreary, and I love a upsetting sort of climax ending to a film. I'm all for that. I love it. But I also just can't help but love this ending. It's just so perfect, in my opinion. I don't think it could have ended in a better way, in my opinion.
I wanna kind of like go back to a couple subtle moments that I wanted to talk about back in the car. Very quick, when she's talking, like, I think when she's talking first about like her experiences and stuff like that, she's like not looking at him, she's like looking away. And he has this moment of like almost like reaching for her to comfort her with his hand, and then he like pulls it back when she like looks at him. It's like kind of like an uncertain moment, and she does the exact same thing when he's talking about his marriage, and I just love it because it reminds me of the first one where they're looking at each other, they keep looking away when the other one's looking at the other. That's just a really nice moment that's in there, just like those subtle touches.
Really nice and not stupid kind of reincorporation of like dialogue and gestures. Yeah, I love that little attention to detail. It just makes it feel so rewarding, I guess, watching these movies like in succession, one after another. But
that driver's the fucking man. That man's a real champ.
He deserves a huge tip. A little juvenile, and I even wrote that it was juvenile in my notes, but her saying pussy in French is maybe the most attractive thing I've ever heard. Her French accent is just, she's gorgeous.
Is that your favorite accent, would you say?
It's one of them. I don't know if I could pick a favorite. I'm a lover of all.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, I mean, a couple of lines that I love in this film. The opening quote, a memory's never finished as long as you're alive, which I absolutely love. It's in reference, Jesse says it when they're walking through the garden, and Celine kind of points out how that really sad ending where he went to the train station in Vienna and she wasn't there. Now it doesn't have to have a sad ending because they met years later, and they know why. They don't have that lingering curiosity. Another one that I absolutely love, memory's a wonderful thing if you don't have to deal with the past. I think that's great. I think that is right before the other quote I mentioned, but it also kind of,
which I like that line is called out for being cheesy. Also, I think by Jesse, because I think
it is like, and that's what I love too. They're not afraid to kind of poke fun. It's not like Deadpool levels of like self-awareness in the writing, but they're not afraid to poke fun at like, oh, I know what I'm saying is corny, and I don't know. I appreciate that honesty because it does feel honest, and I like that. One little
I'm pulling up my notes. I didn't look my
didn't
notes
either, and
once
that's why I'm just kind of
conversation,
racking through them now. But I mean, I'm we kind of talked about all the scenes that I really want to. If you want to move on to Before Midnight, and then we'll head on out of here.
Yeah, I'm just brushing by these. I think we covered a lot here. I love that you don't feel the length of the tracking shots. They just feel so natural, like you're just walking with these people. You don't realize that it's like, I don't know what the longest tracking shot is in this one. I think I know the next movie how long the longest shot is.
Yeah, I'm not too sure either.
There might be like a I don't know, because it does cut from the back of them too. So I don't actually know how long the longest single shot is.
But each shot
I know,
is like
I think there's like
multiple minutes long, regardless. Like you said, really
Yeah,
long,
oh, yeah.
unbroken takes, and it's never done in like a flashy way, like you said, and it almost goes unnoticed because you're like, and then you're out of nowhere, you're like, oh shit, they've been having this same shot and this same conversation for like 8 minutes, and it
just blends. I love when it happened. Side note, it happened in like I think The Brutalist a couple times. It happens in other movies too, where it's like I love when I'm watching a movie and I'm so invested in the scene, I'm not paying attention all the time to like camera work or just like it blends so well that like by the end of it, I'm like, wait, was that one shot or was that like I love when I ask that question myself. Because
Robert Eggers does it a lot too. I saw that a lot in Nosferatu, where you're just like, holy shit, this take's been going on for quite a while, and it's just characters moving around a scene, and the blocking is great. It's just, and again, same as the first film, really great use of location. The first one, explored Vienna really well. I loved them walking around Paris in this one. It was just, again, very aesthetically pleasing. They just choose like really, really great areas to film in and just use the scenes to their max potential. I don't know. I really enjoy it. Is this the second one? That's the one where they go in the church, right? Or no, is that the first one?
Wait, well, they go in. Wait, are you? They don't go to church in this one. I think it's the.
I think it's the first one. Yeah.
One,
okay. So we forgot to mention that scene, but like I said, guys, we're gonna miss some stuff. But yeah. Because
Vienna has like I think they're known for like their cathedrals.
Is that what
too,
they go in? A cathedral? I feel like they went into some.
Well, in the third one, they go into
the small little church in that one. But I'm trying to think, and I don't know. I'm getting my films mixed up, but there's so many.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think I talked about. One thing too that I love is that there's like these fall leaves, and it's like must be, I don't know if it's set in the fall or just shot in the fall, but you get these nice little moments where you see some fall leaves falling throughout the Paris city streets, and it's again very just aesthetically pleasing. Looks very nice on the eyes.
It's the warmest. It's the warmest one. It's like the warmest.
Yeah, for sure.
one.
And I think that's reflected in the poster of these movies because I think it has the warmest color. But yeah, so much great stuff in this film. I love too. We didn't really mention, but what kind of caps off her breakdown in the car is her saying that she was fine up until she read his fucking book, and it was
that's good.
You get a little bit of it in this one, but you get more of it, and I think this is a nice kind of segue. Unless you have anything more about Before Sunset, but you get more of it in the third film about her feelings about being the subject of this book. So yeah,
you get a lot.
So would you like to move on to Before Midnight then? All right, guys. Do you need a break? I think I'm gonna pee real quick.
I'm good.
All right, guys. Thanks again for that little commercial break. We are moving on to the third and final film in the Before trilogy, of course, Before Midnight 2013. Budget of $3 million, so our biggest budget yet, and box office of 23.3 mil. So the highest of the trilogy, which is pretty cool. Not by much, but still highest grossing of the entire trilogy, and perhaps the most interesting of the trilogy. And I think even those who this might not be their favorite of the bunch will agree that this definitely has the most different vibe and structure than the rest of the films. For starters, it takes place 9 years, obviously like the other two, but now Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy's Celine and Jesse are married with two blonde twin girls, along with they are obviously they hang out and watch sometimes Jesse's actual son from his first marriage. The scene, the opening scene of the film is Jesse dropping off Hank, his son, at the airport. He's going back after spending the summer in Greece with Jesse, Celine, and the twins. And, kind of picks up from there as Jesse and Celine get in the car with the twin girls and are heading back to where they're staying. And that kind of kicks off the plot. But, yeah, I find it really hard to set up the plot of this one because there's a lot going on in it that you just find out as the plot progresses.
Yeah. So let's start with this. Why don't you guess the rating on Rotten Tomatoes?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to say 97 for critics.
98.
Oh, I was so going to go with a 98 too. And I was like, no, that there's...
Because you guessed it for Sunset. You guessed 98.
I know. I should have stuck with my gut.
What do you think the audience score is?
Ooh, audience score. I'm gonna guess it's the lowest of the bunch of the three, and I'm gonna go with a 90.
82.
Wow, that is just
me off,
simply
man.
wrong.
That pisses me off.
You know what though? I understand it because. So going into more about why. What I meant when I said that this was a very different vibe from the first two is, and I want to bring back that kind of video essay that I was talking about, I think during the first or second one, how the first film from Richard Linklater's own mouth is described as what might be. Before Sunset is what could or should be, and this film is what is. As this is easily the most realistic, grounded of the trilogy. Not that the first two are overly whimsical or magical, quote unquote, but they are much more, they have a lot more levity to them. There's a lot more positivity. There's a lot more hope and romantics. And so I'm actually not surprised that the audience score is lower for the most realistic and probably heartbreaking of the trilogy.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that's how you used to feel, right?
Yeah, so when I first watched these, again, watching these as like a young, optimistic college kid, 19, 20 years old, I watched these three movies, in pretty quick succession to one another. I think I did one each day. And I'm like, I get to the third film and I'm like, holy shit, that hurt a lot. And as like a 19, 20-year-old kid, I didn't... Yeah, that shit hurt my feelings. I did not like it. I mean, no, that's not to say I didn't like it. I still loved it. I still gave it like a really high rating and really enjoyed it. But I was just so in love with the first two, and I just thought that they were so... I guess I was wrong from what I just said earlier, because they were kind of magical in a way. They felt like the most realistic magic possible, and it was just love, but it was so genuine and was honest in its depiction, and it was handled so meticulously and with so much care, and it was performed by two actors who, again, helped create these characters so that all of it just felt so connected.
Jake didn't like it,
and then he
didn't like it slapped with the truth.
So it's like, I don't know how to describe the succession of feelings in this trilogy, because it really kind of starts out and you're on this crazy high, and you're setting out off into the world, and everything is so exciting and it's so fresh and you feel so energized. And then the second one, and you're like, yeah, life's been a little bit tough, but this is, now you're winning. You won. You got it. You got what you wanted. And then the third film is like getting hit with a sack of bricks. And you just don't see it coming because the first two are so different. But now what I used to see as the third one as a weakness, with it being so different and just way too heartbreaking, now I kind of see it as a positive because it really makes it stand out amongst the three films.
Yeah. It's like when you said sack of bricks, I just thought of like Marv in Home Alone 2 just getting smacked in the face with brick after brick. That's what
Can
it
I
is.
talk about that scene for 1 second? He should have like he should be dead, right?
Oh, I counted when I was watching them this Christmas. I counted how many times they should have died in the first one versus how many times they should have died in the second one. And I think in the first one, I think they maybe should have died like once or twice. In the second one, it was like 9 or 10 times.
Yeah, that's why the second one's better, because the stakes are higher. Come on, when he lights his fucking head on fire, that shit's hilarious. But no, yeah. So yeah, no, that just made me. Every time I watch that scene in Home Alone, I'm like, just the first one alone should have killed him. Getting hit with a brick in the head from that height. But that's how watching Before Midnight feels. As folks, again, if you're for some reason still listening and you haven't seen these films, I don't know why you're still here.
That'd be crazy.
Congrats.
That'd be crazy.
That'd be wild. But no, this film is really heartbreaking from the get-go. As once Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy are in the car, their two girls are asleep, and one of the first things that Ethan Hawke's character Jesse does, which is kind of funny, is he sees that his one daughter hadn't finished eating her apple, so he asks Celine to grab it for him.
Nasty.
And she kind of jokes with him, and she's like, "Yeah, it's like half eaten. It's already starting to brown."
Yeah,
It's really odd, but they immediately start having this conversation, and you can kind of tell even before that, even before Ethan Hawke gets to the car, he has this look when his son is getting on the plane that you can see that this is ripping his heart out. Having to say goodbye to his son and not being such an active part of his life is truly just ripping him to shreds. And it makes you think back to the second film when he mentions how he wants to not miss a single moment of his son's life, and now he maybe sees his son during the summer. I think that's the arrangement he has with his ex-wife. And it really just immediately breaks your heart just seeing his reaction. Again, very good facial acting from Ethan Hawke, but just his expression seeing his son get on the plane just hurts your soul. 1 second, my AirPod just died.
Okay.
It's all right. I'll be able to keep flowing. Let's get it back in. Get it in there. All right, hold on. This over too. All right, we're back. But then you move on from the scene in the airport, and they're in the car, and that's when Julie Delpy, you kind of like what you were talking about earlier, you know, with her getting more politicized, more career focused as the films go along. Because now she's in her early 40s, and her career is way more crucial to her, but it's also, she's in a state where she's really frustrated with her current life position. And because of that, she's not only frustrated with her romance life and with being a mother, but now you have her work life on top of that. So she just seems extremely stressed out from the get-go. You can tell she's kind of toying with this idea of going back to working for this guy that she hated working for, as pointed out by Jesse, but also she points out, yeah, he sucks, but he gets things done. And that's what she kind of feels in life right now, like with her career, with her life, that she's not getting things done. And so you already are put in a tumultuous thing, and even this is the first scene with the two characters that we've seen since that amazing, beautiful ending of the second film, and things are already starting to ramp up. And now you have her career life in kind of a bad place. You have Ethan Hawke, who's longing to just be in his son's life and be more present in his son's life, and now that's when the heads start butting. And before you even get out of the car, Julie Delpy is already saying, this is where it ends. This is where we end.
Sucks.
Immediately, within the first 15 minutes.
How long would you say that car shot was?
It feels longer than I think it actually is. And that's just, again, a lot of unbroken takes.
Yeah.
And just, again, because they're torturing you. Because they're already like, hey, this is not the Celine and Jesse that you knew from the last movie.
What do you think? It's
this
like
is
5
them
minutes?
9 years later. It's no, I'd say it's closer to 10, maybe around eight or 9, because they get through a lot of conversation in there.
Because their longest shot in this was 11 minutes, I think, and I think that might have been
wow.
I think it might have been a tracking shot even. So this one, even being like close to 10 minutes,
it's definitely none of the scenes in the hotel. I don't.
No.
Here, you keep talking. I'm gonna look it up.
So, yeah, that was another moment, like instantly, where I'm watching this scene, and you're so engrossed in the conversation, and also like the kind of the bad tension now, no more sexual tension of them just going back and forth, that you forget that this is just one static car shot. And I don't know how much planning went into that. Just like, I mean, a lot of planning goes into
yes. You'll never guess what the longest unbroken take is.
In this one?
Yeah.
Like which shot it is or how long?
Yeah, you'll never guess which shot it is. It's 13 minutes, like I think you said, but
okay, I thought it was 11.
13 minutes.
13, wow.
Take a wild guess at which one it is.
Is it not when they're walking like down the?
It's the car scene.
Is it the car scene? It's that long.
It is the car scene. Yeah, it's 13 minutes long, unbroken.
So then
which is
that scene like
insanely impressive.
Yeah, because like I thought the scene felt longer than it was, but
You thought it was 5 minutes.
well, I have like 5 to 10 minutes, but I was like that no way it was 10 minutes because like
I thought it was like 8. I did not expect 13.
yeah,
Wow.
13 is crazy.
They are such phenomenal actors. They really just nail down these characters.
How much rehearsal do you think that was?
I'm gonna say like at least a week of rehearsals to nail that scene down. You keep talking. I'm gonna see if I can find that now too.
Man,
This is making up for not talking about the behind the scenes in the other ones.
So you kind of get this. Jesse first brings up his dilemma with Hank, right? Is this kid's name? And just how he's upset that he can't be part of his life and everything. So he brings up the idea of like, is there a possibility that we could be more of a present, like have more of a presence in his life? And he's kind of like dancing around the fact that he's suggesting, is there a possibility we can move back to the States? And that is the immediate conflict between the two. And it kind of escalates pretty quickly there from Celine. And I'm not gonna like it's not like she's not justified. I get the dilemmas from both sides. That's the conflict you have as an audience, as a viewer, is that like you see there's no good guy bad guy in this. It's just two people that have their own convictions, and they've kind of gotten to a point in their marriage where things aren't like, they're not meshing as well as they used to be. There's different responsibilities that they want to be present for. And so this is the initial one that kind of sets Celine off into this tangent and says, oh God, this is how it is. This is how it's going to end.
This is how it ends. Yeah.
So
it's hard. When she says that, it's just already so heartbreaking.
Yeah. I'm like,
and you're just shattered because, again, watching these movies in succession, you're coming off the second one, and that ending is so magical and romantic. And to immediately just open up with this, that they're just taking shots at each other right off the bat, and just for her to immediately, and he even says, like, he's like, you just jumped off a cliff. It's so in the moment, and they kind of look past it because I think right after that, her daughter, one of the daughters wakes up, and it's funny because she's like, where's my apple? And they have to like play it off like they don't know. And they mention they also like skip going to the ruins. They're like, just let the kids sleep, which I just think is like a funny little detail for that. But no, moving on from that, I want to kind of jump a little forward to because I do like the little scene in between the dinner scene and the car scene. It's really funny with where Ethan Hawke is talking to the people that he's been staying with, who you find out it's this older writing professor, and then I don't know how they know the other guy, but they say he makes bicycles. But either way, they're all staying there, and they're talking about his books and how he wrote the first one about their night together in Vienna, and then the second book that he wrote was about their day together and how they like had sex for days on end after the ending of the second one. And you get a little kind of arrogant smile from Jesse, which he's prone to do throughout these movies. But I just love their discussion about his book. I think it's really fun and entertaining to watch them kind of talk about this book idea that he has about this kind of how all these characters' lives would connect through this one singular film. And that being, I think it's On the Waterfront.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's on the waterfront, and how all these characters' lives would be impacted by this one film, but in different ways, and they would all have these different problems, like a woman who constantly feels like everything she's seen, she's experienced before, this constant state of deja vu. And I'm just like, listening to this, and I'm like, I would read this book, or I would see this movie. This sounds like a really interesting concept for a movie. But it also just makes me think back to the first film, and something we didn't bring up, when they're still on the train and he's talking about his idea for a public access TV show, and how each day or each episode would be a 24-hour long live stream of a different person's life in a different part of the world. So you'd get this kind of 365-day show where you would just see the different perspectives of daily lives of different people throughout the world. And immediately, even before they get off the train, there's starting to be those little cracks where they don't see eye to eye, because she's like, oh, that like all the boring stuff that people do day to day, like who would want to watch that boring shit? And he's like, well, I try to see it as the beauty of everyday life. And there's already that kind of little differing disagreement, and that persists too, because while Jesse is still, he I don't know, because in different moments in the first one he's a little bit more what's the word, optimistic or pessimistic. In the first one, he has his moments of pessimism, but he also does kind of have that doughy-eyed thing too. They both do. But by the third film, he still tries to do that stuff. And I think there's very big differences, like when they're in the car, right? And they're talking about how Hank met a girl that summer, and that's why he had the best summer of his life. Not because he spent it with his dad, but because he met a girl and they had a kiss, and it was like his first little young love. And all Jesse says is, oh, what if they, fall in love and spend the rest of their life together? And Celine has like a kind of a visceral reaction to it. She's like, what are you, a child? Like, that's so stupid. They're just kids. And you start to see that Jesse still kind of does have that twinkle in his eye, that optimism. But for her, it's that romanticism.
Oh, it's like
that
gone.
nature. It's gone.
It's like completely
completely
gone.
absent.
Yeah. And that's something that, like, did it bother you ever watching this, that it almost feels like, you have to tell me what you noticed more on Jesse's side that you didn't agree with more so than like previous watches, because one thing that did bother me was that like everything's completely vanished. It's like hard to, like, sometimes Celine just pisses you off, like at the dinner scene. I don't know, like I think
I'm at the point where they both piss me off. Like, yes, and that's kind of bled into, I just wanted to bring up that scene where they're discussing his like book and his book idea, because I think it would, I thought it was just like an interesting little scene. But cutting to that dinner scene, for those listening to set the stage, it's when Jesse, Celine, the older writing professor whose house they're staying at, his I don't know if it's his current wife or just his girlfriend, but she's there, the guy who makes the bicycles and his wife, and then this younger couple that kind of mirrors like a young Jesse and Celine in a way, which I think is a very interesting little detail. And this is another aspect where this film is very different from the other two, as Jesse and Celine are pretty much the focal point of every single scene in the first two films. You don't really get a lot of inclusion of other characters. You get that brief little moment on the bridge with the guys inviting them to the play in the first one, and that German couple, but you don't really get a lot of other characters. Whereas in this film, you get that entire scene I mentioned earlier where Celine's not even in it. You have a scene that kind of follows that after Inside, where she's inside and Jesse's not in that scene. And so they introduce a lot more characters in this one, but I think it actually adds to the film's overall just magnitude. It just feels like a little bit more is going on in this one, not just with our two main characters, but now you have these kind of side characters that also have like little interesting personalities, and I love the different dynamics that they bring. And you get a great scene with the older woman where she's talking about the fading memory of her husband, and it's just really, really sad and solemn, and it really just kind of hits you, because very similar to other conversations in this entire trilogy, there's a lot of ups and downs of this. There's a lot of rising tensions and then deflating tensions, and things heat up and then they kind of simmer down a little bit. And just going into what you were talking about with Celine at this scene, she kind of airs her and Jesse's dirty laundry in front of the entire dinner table. And it's very uncomfortable.
So that's what I'm talking about. Is like, I'm not saying Jesse's perfect, and he does piss me off in parts. I feel like she goes out of her way sometimes to pick unnecessary fights or just like humiliate him publicly. And I don't think he does that as much. And I don't know if that's just like, I don't know if that's like a choice I'm not going to say I have a problem with, because I think this movie's like extremely well done in like every way. But I almost wish Jesse had more of those moments that pissed me off too, where it wasn't like Celine seems like she's just in attack mode.
What I noticed is he does. This go around really got me to notice he does, but they're just in subtler
You gotta
ways.
tell me.
So in this dinner scene particularly, I don't think that he does as much terrible stuff in that one, right? Where that's a lot of Celine. But then I think of the scene after, and I think of a little moment. I think it's extremely weird to not tell your... Oh, okay, well, you find out that they never got married. I guess that's like a little plot detail you find later, that they had the 2 kids, but they never actually tied the knot and got married officially. So I guess his girlfriend, the mother of his 2 daughters, but he doesn't tell her immediately when his own grandmother dies.
Yeah.
And that to me is kind of weird. You know, you have this entire life with this person. You changed your entire where you live. You changed your entire life to be with this person. You had 2 children with this person, and you're not telling them when your own grandmother dies. It seems a little odd. And then you just get moments later in the film. You know, if you want to jump ahead a little bit, but when they get to the hotel and the big scene happens, like the scene of perhaps the entire trilogy. And it's this huge argument that, again, has so many ups and downs in terms of emotions and tone and just the levels of intensity. And it's so well acted by both of them.
It really messes with the audience because you get so many moments where you can take a breath and be like, okay, good, it's done. And then it just immediately starts back up by one word or one sentence.
Yes, just one of them will say one little thing, and then it starts to tick the other person off. A recent film that I think kind of does something similar in a different way, but is Challengers, the Luca Guadagnino film. When characters are having conversations, you'll think it'll simmer down, and then it kind of just goes back up in intensity, and the music kicks in, and it's very up and down. Very different movies, but just kind of made me think of that parallel. But yeah, so they get to the argument scene, and it really kicks off because earlier on in the film, Hank is on the phone with Celine, and Jesse wants to talk to him, but she hangs up. And you can see it bothers him. And then later, when they're at the hotel, it happens again. Hank calls, she takes the phone call, she hangs up before putting Jesse on. And that bothers him again, and this time he gets more vocal about it. But it's in this scene where I just find him very condescending at times towards her, in a more aggressive way, like it's less passive-aggressive. And one thing... Again, like I mentioned earlier, that I think is an issue with his character is he's that kind of cliche person who every time there's an argument, it's always, oh, I need it to be completely just fact by fact. It needs, present me this, and tries to completely remove emotion from situations where emotion is pivotal. And she says that. She's like, oh, you can sit back with your objective perspective and make all these points. But I'm like... He almost tries to make her feel bad about getting emotional and bringing emotion into the conversation and the topic. And again, I think you get this kind of indication throughout their conversations that this isn't the first time this is happening. Every time he has to say goodbye to his son, he gets very passive aggressive in his little comments, his little remarks. And it's like, listen, if you want to move to Chicago, just flat out say it, because just going through the motions and going along with things and never just addressing the situation seems to be his MO. And I noticed that a lot more in this film, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm the reasonable one. I'm the one who keeps a level head. And it's like, no, you just never address the elephant in the room. You're fine completely walking in, not noticing things and letting things just boil under the surface. Maybe she goes overboard in bringing things to the surface and maybe goes a little too out of her way to be brash and blunt about things, but I think he goes too far in the opposite direction. I think she's too aggressive. I think he's too passive aggressive. Yeah. And when those two worlds collide, it's just a bed of chaos.
It's like, because
that's what just makes this film so good.
Yeah, because it's like both halves are trying to like almost make up for what the other half is lacking. So it definitely makes sense. Like the clash is a good one. Because those moments are subtle, it's easy to kind of get more frustrated with Celine's character. At least for me, because like, I'll be honest, I sometimes can do that, right? I can like, in arguments sometimes I will try to like almost lower my tone. I've done it with like even growing up. Like if like
Yeah.
if my parents got mad, if like, you know, and it was over nothing, I would almost just like have the calmest voice and be like, what are you getting so angry about? And I get it can come off condescending, but sometimes it is so unnecessary to fly off the rails, which I think she does sometimes, which is okay because it creates it creates believability. It creates realism within a relationship that has that. And they're just two different personalities. I don't think his is always condescending. I think he is like sometimes genuinely trying to neutralize the situation because she's like just. It's like one thing will set her off and she just goes and goes and goes and he's just like, oh my God, I didn't mean it like that. Like there's so many moments like that where it's like,
there are, but there's I think equally the amount of moments where he just like feels like he has to get the last word in, and he feels like he also does raise the tension. Like he does escalate the situation in certain, you know, especially in that fight scene. They kind of take turns, like which one is the one really raising the intensity of the moment, because again, like we said, there are moments where the, you know, conversation simmers down and they get real with each other and it's not hurtful, but then again one of them just has to get a jab in, and I think in this film he does it equally as much as she does. And again, I agree with you, she is too overly aggressive in a lot of situations. I don't want to say she's too emotional, but I think she sometimes lets emotion eclipse reasonability, and I think he sometimes lets reason totally eclipse emotion. And I think both of them, in an ideal world where they're, you know, perfect people, they both kind of can find a middle ground and find some compromise. But I think they're just both such intense people on opposite ends of the spectrum to where they're gonna clash. And that's where you see this. Like in the first two films, you see those little moments, you see those little cracks start to form in both of them. You see where their personalities don't exactly align, and you see where down the line that could be a conflict. But the issue is, as we've mentioned, those first two films take place in such a small span of time. The first film takes place in barely a day together. The second film, what is it, an hour in real time? An hour and a half real time? Yeah. Something along that sorts. So you just get these brief little moments with these people, and because you fall so in love with them, even you as the audience member start to overlook some of their flaws and some of their, oh, hey, down the line in a relationship, this is going to be a problem. And, you know, you kind of get a little bit of that in this movie, you know, kind of going back to the conversation at the dinner table. I forget what it is that kind of kickstarts this. But, they're just talking, it's because the young girl, the actress, she doesn't know how Jesse and Celine met. And this is where you get a little bit more of Celine not being a big fan that she's in these books, because they're like, you got to read Jesse's books. That's how they met and fell in love. And, you know, she kind of makes this little comment like, yeah, especially if you really want to know an intimate detail, like what it's like to have sex with me, then you can read it. And so, even later in the... sorry.
No, I was going to stay on that scene. So, like, okay, something that irritated me there at the dinner scene was even when they said, it sounds so romantic, and she just says, like, okay, no, don't bullshit me. I watched the second movie. I saw the romantic side.
But she points out, and that's why I brought it up. She points out, Jesse goes, he starts out by getting the starting point wrong. He goes, a couple years later, we bumped into each other. And she goes, no, that's not what happened. I went there because you wrote a book about me and I wanted to see you. And he's like, oh yeah. And then they were like, it's romantic. And she kind of does downplay it. And again, if you're looking at that second film in the context of just that little space of time, yeah. We also do completely ignore, though, that they both were in relationships at the time. They both cheated on their current partners. Jesse cheated on the wife and mother, Jesse cheated on the mother of his son. It's not the greatest of things. Now, when the lens we see them through, we kind of ourselves as the audience idolize these characters because they're so charming and personable and we love seeing them together, but we overlook that they kind of did some shitty things.
I think romanticism, though, isn't based off it doesn't mean that there can't be shitty things happen. It's romantic between them. That's where it is. That's where I'm saying it lives.
But I think he does kind of, and I think that's again where some problems lie with Jesse, where he isn't real enough about the situation. The fact of the matter is, yes, you did completely uproot your life and you didn't handle it in the best way. And now you're seeing the repercussions of it. And he kind of chooses to put that blame on her in a very similar way to that she throughout the film tries to put a lot of the blame on him. And a lot of this movie is them pointing the finger at the other one and saying, no, you're wrong. But it's so captivating. And I think it just makes for such a more interesting film than the first two. And
there's another part of the dinner scene that pissed me off. Okay, let's see if
all right, go for it. I feel like you just hate Celine at this point.
No, well, no, I like dislike both of them.
There we go. We're at the right spot.
But even this was just rude. It was a rude thing to say, and I don't. It's not like called for.
Is it when she impugns his cocksmanship?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
No, it's when they just They do as little like just complimenting their daughter, saying, "Oh, they're so adorable" or whatever, and she just goes, they're okay. Like, what is that for? It doesn't.
I think that's just a joke. Well, I don't take that too seriously.
I don't know. But the thing is, it's playing on that scene where she is constantly refuting. Like there's constantly a rebuttal to be cynical. That's the thing. And I get it. It works because she's so drained. Like all the emotions drained. I get it. It's still fucking frustrating though.
It's extremely frustrating. And I think though that's just what makes this maybe the most compelling film of the three. Is that it is the one where the characters have experienced the most life. You're not seeing them in this like brief little moment out of time where the outside world and all of the drama and bullshit of it don't matter. You're seeing them in the very real state of things. This is, again, the most grounded of the three films. It is the least whimsical. It is the least magical. And I think the ending is a little interpretable. I think the ending, like the other two, had there not been a sequel after them, is a little bit ambiguous. I think the second one probably has like the most defined ending of the three. But when you look at this film, again, it's just a lot of gut punches throughout the entire course of the runtime. It's just, you get some moments where you're like, oh, isn't this sweet? This is the Jesse and Celine I remember from the last two movies. They're sweet and they're philosophical and they're having these great deep discussions. And then boom, it's, we're back in reality. This is the end. The other two films, they save like the reality of things. I don't think the second one ever really gets to it because they end on such a great, happy ending. The first film, it ends on such a like, oh, you don't know, this is the sad part because they have to say goodbye to each other. The third film is just endless, just heartbreak and sadness. And oh yeah, it wasn't just this perfect little, and that's where I kind of disagree, where I don't know. Is Romeo and Juliet romantic because they both off themselves at the end out of love? I don't think so. And I don't think, I'm not going to say that the second film isn't romantic or that, we've already highlighted how sweet and genuine the romance is in the first two films. But, kind of like Jesse's character, I think we as the audience do forget sometimes that it created a really messy situation. They did cheat on their significant others. Jesse fucked his entire life up. He put himself in this situation. And I don't think it's right for him to say to her, I fucked up my life for you. I think that's a really shitty thing to put on another person, because now you're essentially just putting the blame on them. Like, dude, you could have she kept reminding you to leave. If you didn't want to fuck your life up and really just mess things up, you could have left and gone to your flight at any time. You stayed. That's on him. And I think he just, in this film, he refuses to take a lot of responsibility. And I think the beginning scenes really do highlight him just being passive aggressive in what he actually wants. He's too afraid to say, yes, I want me and you to move there. So he kind of coyly does it, and does it in a really passive way and sprinkles it in here and there, and then tries to play the, oh, I'm just being the reasonable one. You're getting too emotional.
I don't know. I still think you're reading that wrong, because maybe I'm not a great guy sometimes, but if I wanted a big decision like that, I feel like I'd be too nervous to flat out ask. It's not like, because you don't want to impose that directly, whereas like I agree,
but it's no better to do it passively.
It's not passively,
right?
I don't think it's passively though. I think because he does word it in a way of like, I'm trying to think of, is there a possibility, like without asking her, hey, can we move? And then having it be.
But she makes a great point though. Like, shared custody, moving your entire family back to where they live for every other weekend. That doesn't seem logical.
I agree with that. She said, she even says I'm being the rational one. But I'm saying before that, before that, when he's just like posing the thought, because it's a concern. He's talking about his feelings at this point. She flies off the handle and like says, and it just, I don't know. She's like saying, "You want me to move to Chicago?" And he's like, "I'm trying to just see where your head's at. If I tell you how I'm feeling, is this a possibility?" He does say, is there any possible way we can make this work? He does say that. But the thing is, I understand approaching it very sensitively. You can't just like come to your wife and say, "I want to move to Chicago." It just doesn't work.
I don't think you do it like that, but I think if you do it in a straighter, more respectful approach, you sit them down and you say, "Listen, I would," but he doesn't seem to do that. He doesn't even say like, "Hey, do you think that Hank's life would be improved with a more consistent presence by you and I?" He doesn't bring that up until the fight in the hotel. That's like way down the line in the film. He doesn't even say that in the car. Again, he's very coy. I'm mainly talking about the car scene though, where he's like very kind of underplaying.
Yeah, he's like
he's
thinking out
downplaying.
loud. He plays it off as thinking out loud.
He's almost repressing his own emotions, but still speaking out loud so that they get heard. And it is frustrating to watch. And then, I don't know, there's little moments too where, you know, when they're walking right after the dinner and they're walking to the hotel, and there's this little moment where he's like, "Oh, I know that he's not the oldest guy you've ever, or I'm not the oldest guy you've ever blown." Or just him, I don't know. Again, like, you want to talk about Celine making that joke about their kids being all right. Like, to me, that it's equally as frustrating when they're in the car and, like, he pretends to be upset that, you know, she wasn't his first love, or he wasn't her first love, or whatever it was. And he's like, "No, you were my first love." And, which again, nice little callback to the first film where, you know, one of the first things he asks her is like, "What's your first sexual experience?" And they bring that kind of back a little bit in the car scene. Again, nice little just attention to detail. But I just think there's a lot of moments with Jessie that kind of go underplayed, because I think the film does portray Celine again as the more overly emotional one, to, you know, and it's kind of,
I do think
she's the one who gets very loud and aggressive.
I think sometimes they unfairly villainize her.
I don't think they unfairly villainize her. I think they're both villains in their own right, and like, they're not even villains; they're just people. I mean, again, this film, you know,
yeah, but I'm saying, meaning, I don't think she is a villain. She's not. Like, they both.
I just think this is where she's the most interestingly written.
I agree. I love like everything about this movie.
So you sound frustrated with her character, but are you like happy that you're frustrated with her character, or
yes,
do you see it as a negative?
It does work. Like, I'm very frustrated with both of them back and forth.
All right. This whole time I thought we were debating this. I don't think we are. I think we're on the same side.
But I am wondering, do they kind of, it's because it is subtle with Jessie, so it's harder to see. And
I just think the more you watch the films, the more you see. The more you watch Before Midnight, the more, and before you watch the entire trilogy, the more like little subtleties you see in their characters throughout the course of the three films, where you're like, "Oh yeah, I do pick up on that now. Oh yeah, that is a little, you know."
I'm gonna rewatch this scene at some point. I'm gonna like note down every time I disagree with both of them, and
they're both just, I think, very, I don't know. Again, I think they're both in the wrong, but in different ways. I think they're just two people who created an extremely complicated situation, I think. And again, like, you see the difference in their personalities. And again, I like how like a little ambiguous the ending is on whether, you know, they stay together or this is truly the end. Which reminds me of a great scene when they're watching the sunset.
Yeah, I have it written down.
Still there, still there, still there. Gone.
You're getting it's like every part of the trilogy right there. Yeah. And I love that. So I wanted to talk about the shots here because you brought up the old woman, which what's her name, Natalia?
I believe so. Yeah.
It's framed very similarly, and it shows the same thing that they're talking about. It's like a frame within a frame. So in the dinner scene, Natalia's talking about her husband who's not with her anymore. And it's shot behind Jessie and Celine, and Natalia's like in the center of them. And I love like her line when she says, "Like sunlight, sunset, we appear, we disappear. We're so important to some, but we're just passing through." And
yeah,
it's just you can't help but feel like she's just somehow talking about their relationship. Obviously not, but like it pertains to their relationship in every way, even down to the titles of the movie. And that scene, the next scene where they're watching this, that's like You're just watching their relationship. And it's framed the exact same way, where it's the sun is in between them. They create the frame around that image. So I just love how that was shot, and I love just like the symbolism of like that, the imagery.
I will say, even though I love the look of film, I'm not sure actually if the second one was digital or shot on film.
I think the third was the only digital one.
Yeah, the third one I believe was, I think you're correct in that. And I'm normally a guy who prefers film over digital. Like usually I just think it looks better, but I have to say, I think Before Midnight might be the best looking one. It might be the one that utilizes the location the best. And I think that's probably just because you get a little bit more diversity in the settings. The first two have really great locations, and there's so many memorable moments in different spots, but this third one just uses Greece to like its fullest. You see like the beaches, you see the ruins. They go into this little old church that's beautiful. And I do think it's funny, she kind of highlights how ugly the hotel is, because it looks so contemporary compared to like what they've been staying in. Like even that little house, or not little, but that house that they were staying at with the professor writer was great. It just looked so aesthetically pleasing, and this film is, I don't know, so well lit, and it's the whole thing just looks great. So I really don't know which one is like my favorite looking of the trilogy. I think I have my favorite written, but yeah, man, there's just can I talk about my what I think is probably the most heartbreaking moment of the trilogy?
Let's hear it.
It's gotta be. So you have, again, we said like the levels of the huge argument fight scene. This is where I kind of made that comment earlier. She impugns his coxmanship, which if you've checked out our episode on Network over on our Patreon, you'll know that that's a reference to that movie.
I already know what you're going to say here, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, but she kind of talks about him like not, being a great lover, and he has sex the same way every time. But they have this up and down. She leaves, comes back a few seconds later. Argument resumes. They continue, simmers down, builds back up. And then she hits him with the line. And she says, I forget if she says, you know what it is, but she says, I don't think I love you anymore. And that, after watching the previous two movies, and even after watching everything in the third film, for her to say that, because you just know that, or at least you felt throughout the rest of the movie that, yeah, they're going through a rough patch. There's a lot of real life shit that's getting in the way of them being able to love each other as much as possible. And it's very real, it's very genuine, it's very honest. But you still feel like they love each other. But there's just other shit getting in the way. And then that whole argument scene happens for all the ups and downs, all the times, like Josh said, you think it's over, and it just keeps on coming at you relentlessly. And then she says, I don't think I love you anymore, and just leaves. And it ends on this like really hauntingly weird close-up shot of the tea. It's like this little teacup with the tea bag sitting in there. I don't know, but it hits me hard,
because
it's something.
You know there's something there, because you wouldn't have done that shot. So like, what the hell is going on with the tea?
I don't know. I'll have to look more into that, or maybe watch this movie a few more times. But that's what ends the argument scene, is her saying that, and then again, their personalities are kind of highlighted one more time as she's sitting alone near the waterfront, and he goes to her and he tries to spin this little idea that he's from the future and he went in a time machine, and she wrote this note to him that he wanted to read to her. She wanted, like, her future self wanted him to read to her, whatever it was. And immediately he starts reading it. She goes, no, I would never talk like that. And kind of writes it off. And for most of this, he's really trying to play it up. He's really trying. And she just doesn't give in and thinks it's stupid and wants him to go away. And then he gives up the act, and he goes into just real emotion mode and is like, listen, I love you. I know all the other shit's in the way, but this, if you want real love, this is it. And
it's not perfect, but it's real.
It's not perfect, but it's real.
Now, do you think, I have a question for you, because like it's very, very vague. It's definitely obvious that he cheats on her with that girl from his book tour, right? Do you think the implication was correct that she also cheated on him?
Yeah, I think they both cheated on each
do
other.
too.
I think that's the vibe I get, and I love. I'm glad you brought that up because I would have completely forgotten to talk about that aspect of the argument. But just that moment where, because again, even up to that point, you're like, man, like at least they've never slept with somebody else, right? And then you get that moment in the argument, and they're just both going at each other, and neither of them will admit or deny what's being accused of them, and it's really just. You're just getting hit after hit after hit. It's just like these gut punches, like I said, and they just don't let up until you get that knockout punch from Celine at the end of the fight. But yeah, no, I think they both cheated on each other. Again, like he said, it's not perfect, but it's real, and I don't know. And it's just, again, I love how it ends. I love how I kind of mentioned for us to remember that the first film starts with an old German couple fighting, and this film is they have become that old couple who fights. They're not this romanticized young couple. They're not these young people in love with these wide eyes ready to take on the world. They're older, they're hardened, they're chiseled, they've experienced more, they've hurt each other, they've hurt themselves. They've become way more of real people. But
I love I just couldn't help but laugh when at his one line, but it's when she says, "Did you not hear what I said in the room?" And he goes on his like little monologue about like how she's just like the girls, she just wants to live in some fairy tale, and that he's just trying to make things better here. He said, and then he says, "I tell you, I love you unconditionally. I tell you, you're beautiful. I tell you that your ass looks great when you're 80." I just thought that was funny. It's that line, but
yeah,
like yeah,
no,
I mean,
and it still does manage to be funny. Like there are, I mentioned that young couple, the bike maker and his wife, but they're I think super adorable. I love their little dynamic where they like have these little playful fights, and I think Julie Delpy's character later in the film during the fight, she like mentions how their fights are different than hers and Jesse's. Like when she sees them fight, she sees passion and love, and they care about each other. When they fight, it's like very like cold and callous and harsh.
and she says why. She gives she gives kind of like the secret. She said, "With him, I set the bar very low," which I mean sounds like kind of insulting. But I mean that
What, towards the bike maker?
yeah, her husband at the dinner table, right?
Oh yeah,
She says with I forget his name. But she says
Now, let me ask you a question. Do you believe that study that his wife brings up, that every man who came out of a coma looked immediately at his penis before asking anything else?
I buy it.
And all of the...
Yeah, I buy it.
I don't. Because that would not... I'm sorry. If I come out of a coma, the first thing I'm doing is not looking down to see if my dick
Was
is
it
still
everybody,
there.
or
I
was
mean,
it
that's
just like
the
majority of men?
No, she said every male without fail would look at their dick, and like all the women would ask about their husbands and children. And I was like, no, there's no way. Maybe if you said like 65 or 70%, but me personally, I don't know. My first question is gonna be like, how long have I been in a coma for?
Yeah, what year is it?
How did I get into a coma? What year is it? Did anything else major happen? Are we in a zombie apocalypse? I don't know. I have a lot of questions, but
I want to talk about something that I'm definitely probably reading into, but it's fun and I think it works. The first one's a little harder, but and this might be very obvious, but the second one especially. But I love how the location just plays into like where they are, where their relationship is, and where they are in life. Like Vienna's probably the toughest one. I was like looking up like what comes from Vienna, like what is that known for? And it's the city of music, and they're also known for like their love for like freedom and stuff like that. So that kind of like I could see that playing into like where they are in their life. It's very like
they're the most free.
Yeah, they're carefree. They're it's happy go lucky kind of thing. They have those music scenes. I'm not saying that he put it in there because of that, but I think it works well in this like little fun, try to find the symbolism and even the locations. Cause like, I wonder why he picked these locations. Yeah. Paris obviously is the easiest one. That's just like,
Paris is
it's
gorgeous.
Just a complete like
love, romance.
And Greek, just like the Greek tragedies and tragic figures that come from that. And that's,
I never thought about it that way.
Just where we are with their relationship, and it just completely deteriorates. So I love that there's a lot of like meat and bones with just the locations that they chose. If I'm reading into it, I think it works well enough to like have it be a fun little tidbit there.
I like that connective thread. I just always kind of absorbed the locations, I guess, on a surface level. Obviously, like Paris and romance was obvious to me, but no, I never put the idea of, Greece, Greek tragedy. This is the most tragic of the three. But yeah, no, I love that little detail, and I can't wait to think about that when I watch these movies again in the future. Yeah, I don't know, and kind of just ending things, I guess, because I don't really have much more notes, but the ending of the film, ending with her kind of giving in at the end. She's things lighten up, and there's that moment of just sadness and heartbreak, and you really think things are over, and there is that little glimmer of hope at the end where she says, well, why don't you tell me about this time machine? Mm-hmm. And that's when it starts to zoom out as the music starts to kick in. And that's how the film kind of ends. So there is that kind of glimmer of hope. And I do like that it didn't end on just a completely dour note, but I do like that the ending still kind of gives off ambiguous vibes because, we ended up never getting a fourth film. And, maybe this is something that, 18 years after the release of Before Midnight, maybe, when would that be? 2022. So 2031, maybe if Richard Linklater comes out and makes, another one, a fourth film or whatever, and now Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke are grandparents and their own kids have kids. Maybe that's something that they could do. But if this were to be the last Before film, and I'd be completely fine it just being the trilogy that it is. I don't think we need a fourth film. I'm not necessarily saying I want one, but if this is the true ending, I love how there is that little note of ambiguity that you're like, I don't know if they stay together or if they, just end things. And I think it kind of just harkens back to the beginning of the beginning of the second film, Before Sunset, where at the beginning Ethan Hawke's talking about his book and he's talking about the ending, which is obviously the ending of the first film, and he's saying he wrote it in a way to where each person could take their own meaning from the ending. You on the right, you think that they don't end up together. You think that they do end up together. And you, the last person, you think that you want them to end up together, but you don't think that they do. And I think that's just a very interesting way to cap off this trilogy with an ending where it's like, yeah, you could take meaning. Someone may say, I don't think they end up together. There's too many problems. They want different things out of life. They're not in a good place. They cheated on each other. It's done. Other people might say, no, they're that much in love. There's that much passion. They can push past it. And another person might say, yeah, I want them to end up together. I really do, but I just don't think they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really brilliant way to end it.
You don't think they end up together, right?
I think I'm that third person. I think I want them to end up together, but I just don't think that they do. I think I'm someone who, as much as I love the romanticism and the magicalness of the first two, there is something to that realness that connects with me more, I guess, a little bit later in life. I'm not, quite to the age that they are in that third one, but I just connect to that realist idea more where you can't just get by on passion and love alone. The real shit, the life shit, it does matter.
How long do you think it takes for them to be done?
2 weeks.
Yeah, I think I view it a little longer. I don't see it ending that soon.
I think if they were to make a fourth film and it was that, like, they made it 18 years, that way you skip, because they already missed their opportunity for the 9 years later. I think the best route to take would be to have those characters be divorced at the start of that film.
What do you do?
I think that would be the most interesting.
What do you do with them, though? That's the thing is, like, I don't know what else you do with them.
I think you introduce their kids and their grandkids into the story, and maybe it's it's just them having conversations, but now they're older and divorced, and maybe I don't know. I think it would just be an interesting place to take the characters. Again, I'm not saying I would want a fourth film. I'm totally happy with this trilogy being this like perfect little thing. I don't need a fourth film. We didn't need a fourth Matrix. We don't need a fourth Before movie. So that aside, yeah. But I mean, I'm really kind of out of my thoughts and notes on this third film. If you have anything else you want to talk about, I think we kind of covered our basis. I think the fight at the end is definitely like the meat of the film.
Yeah, that's like what, half hour, 40 minutes probably.
Yeah, and like we said, that car scene is 13 minutes. Yeah. Unfortunately, guys, I looked it up. I could not find in my quick Google search the amount of time it took them to film the car scene, like the amount it takes. But I don't think any of the three films took a long time to shoot. They were kind of in and out. They were shorter shoots. So, which again, just super impressive on Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke's part. They they really sell these movies. I just don't think these work without them.
No, I agree 100%.
Not to discredit Richard Linklater, like he's phenomenal and he's a really pivotal part of the whole thing. But the one line I wanted to say that was all Julie Delpy was the line in the fight where she says the only time she gets peace is when she's taking her shit in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Her morning shit. And she says that she's starting to associate happiness with the smell of shit. And that line was all Julie Delpy. Like that line was strictly her. She wrote that. That was all her. So, and apparently a lot of like the more snappier elements and the more kind of vicious side of Celine in a lot of the argument scenes that came from Julie Delpy. So, and I'm super happy that they ended up getting credit on the second and third film. So, yeah. Do you want to get into the scores or do you have anything else?
I think that's it. Yeah. No, I'm ready to score these.
Alrighty then. Well, why don't we each rank them, and we'll give we'll one of us can go first, but we'll do 3, 2, 1, and we'll just say our rating along with the ranking.
Okay, cool.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So first at third I'm gonna put Before Sunrise, the first film, in third place. I'm gonna give that movie a 9.5 out of 10. I love it. It could be trimmed a little bit, and sometimes it teeters on being a little too fluffy. That's it. But I love the film. The other two are going to be easy. At number 2, I'm going to put Before Sunset. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to put it at number 2.
Wow.
Josh is shocked. If you could see his face right now, he's very shocked. I think the third film is the most interesting out of the bunch. I think it's at a point where the characters have lived through so much that they are just more interesting people. I think I've come around to the idea that it's probably the best looking of the three, and there's just more to chew on in that movie. The first two are so good, and they're such easy watches, and I won't say that Before Midnight probably isn't it probably is the hardest to watch of the three, but sometimes the hardest ones to watch are the best ones to watch, because this is the one that probably sticks with me the most. Even though there's so much great philosophical discussion and so many great moments in the first two, the third one, I don't know. I think it closes out the trilogy in a really, really interesting way, and I really like and appreciate now that it's more different than the other two. And it also obviously gets a 10 out of 10. So the second and first one, literally a week or two from now, I could change my mind. So
damn it, I kind of wish I went first. I went first because I thought I knew Jake, I guess. This was a huge shock because I know how much Jake loves Before Sunset. I remember when we first recorded. Yeah. We both said Sunset at number 1. But I think I don't know if I said this during the recording, but I said next week I might pick Midnight because it's getting better and better for me. But
yeah,
damn. All right, let me just do mine here.
All right.
Before Sunrise, is number 3, going with a 9.1.
Okay.
All right. My number 2, Jake kind of stole my thunder here.
I didn't mean to.
Number 2 is Before Sunset. It's crazy how quickly these movies can shift. Because I swear, when I first watched them, even a year ago, I think my favorite for maybe a month was Sunrise. I just had I don't know, I just had the most fun with it. But as you sit with these movies, like we said, you get more. You get the mature aspects. It's not like I grew 5 years over the last year, but I don't know. I just yeah. The more you analyze them, the more you read about them, you just start appreciating more things. And that's so Before Sunset gets a 9.4 for me.
Oh,
and then hey, no 10's that easy, Jake. No 10's that easy. All right,
whatever.
9.4, and then
fucking ridiculous.
And then Before Midnight gets a 9.6.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Sorry, just no 10's so easy. Okay, we got to calm down here.
All right, hear me out. I'll give you credit if you can name me a better romance movie.
Her.
It's not a romance movie.
Why don't you go watch it again? All right, Eternal Sunshine's better.
That's not a romance movie either.
Okay, what the hell is a romance movie to you?
When Harry Met Sally.
That's not better.
Casablanca.
That's better. Well, I just gave you two, and you don't like my picks.
I just disagree.
Wait, disagree that they're romance movies, or disagree that they're better?
I feel like it's hard to, because I don't know. Eternal Sunshine just rings like a drama to me. I know it's about like I know.
Is Before Midnight a romance?
Shit, fine. All right, whatever. Fuck off. All right, fine. I'm fine with your scores. You don't have to give them 10s. God damn it.
But I remember so we watched these like a little bit ago, and that was our order was the same then with Sunset at the first one, and then I watched these. I had my brother watch them a few weeks ago, and I texted Jake, and I was like, I think Before Midnight just took the cake. That's number one for me now, and I just cannot get over the direction in that, and just it has the best script. It's just like I am feeling every single line with such force, and just the way they can shift such a romance that you buy into and just turn it on its face is just it. I don't know. This just hits me emotionally the most, and I don't know. The endings are weird to me between the second and the third film, because there's part of me that says the second one has the more satisfying ending, which makes it almost feel better. But the third one, I feel almost like more complete in a way, even though it ends kind of like ambiguous. It just feels like such a close to the book that
it's less of an abrupt ending than the second one.
I think that might be
why.
Give you that. I don't know. I love everything about the third one.
I guess because I normally know the runtime of a movie before I watch it. So I think even the first time I watched Before Sunset, I was like, I know this movie's short. So I guess the ending didn't come as abrupt to me. Yeah. You know me, I'm very wary of runtimes.
Yeah, like I couldn't feel the ending coming for Sunset, and that's not even saying it's bad because it's a great ending. But
yeah, I think it's the logical conclusion point.
Yeah. But yeah, Before Midnight, man, it just
yeah, I think it's the best romance movie. Because like I don't know, Eternal Sunshine is like I know, and then what was the other one you said? Her. I know those are both actually 10s for me too. So they're all it'd probably be like, actually those probably would be my 1, 2, and 3 would be those 3. Yeah. All right. Well, unless you count Casino as a romance.
Yikes.
All right. Well, that is really it for the Before Trilogy, guys. I know we ran a little bit long on this one, but the first 20 minutes were all about the Oscars discussion, because we know that this will air right before the Oscars come out, so we thought it was a good timing to discuss our thoughts on that. So either way, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to us discuss this trilogy. I don't know if we said it. This is my favorite trilogy. Is it still yours?
I think so. Yeah, it's between this and Cornetto. They're like, it's like for different reasons.
Yeah, I'd probably go either this or Lord of the Rings. I love those movies, so Cornetto's close up there too, which brings us to our next recommendation for the next trilogy that we are going to be discussing on our next episode. If you guys don't know, we air every other Tuesday. We're supposed to. I've fucked up a few times, guys. Sometimes there's issues with uploading the video. Sometimes the export gets messed up because it takes a very, very long time to export these for YouTube because it's a video format. So hours upon hours. Some stuff gets messed up, but we try to upload every other Tuesday. Also, guys, if you really like our content and you want to support us, head over to our Patreon franchise deep dive, where you can join we only have one tier. Right now I'm starting out real small, $2 a month, and you get access to all of our bonus content. I'm also going to start putting some polls up where you guys can vote on if we're debating between upcoming franchises or trilogies that we want to discuss and we're having a hard time deciding. Maybe we'll do like a fan pick one. If we end up getting enough people subscribed to that, we could do like a fan pick where you guys choose what we talk about next, and we'll just narrow it down to a couple options. Make sure to follow us over there. Josh can obviously give away our socials.
Yeah, so give us a follow on Instagram. That's where we're most active on there. obviously we love interaction. So comment whatever you want. Let us know your opinions on this trilogy, and let us know some of your Oscar picks. See what's what you agree with, what you don't agree with. I know this is the season for big debates for movies with what gets attention, what doesn't. So
yeah, tumultuous time it is. Tumultuous time.
But yeah, and you can follow us at Franchise Deep Dive on Instagram. You can also shoot us an email if that's your preferred method. franchisedeepdive@gmail.com. And like I said, Instagram, slide in our DMs, give us some recommendations if you want.
Flirt with us if you so inclined.
Hey, we're down.
To.
We're down.
But we are down to clown.
But yeah, again, always appreciate you guys. I hope you hope you enjoyed this episode, and hope you enjoy Patreon if you're on there.
Yeah, guys, I don't know if I said exactly what kind of content. I think I missed that part, but our current series that we're doing over on there is our Watchlist Wednesday episodes, where they air opposite weeks of our regularly scheduled episodes. So every other Tuesday for our main episodes over on here, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and then on our Patreon every other Wednesday opposite of that. So you'll get an episode of our regular episodes on Tuesdays, and then if you subscribe to our Patreon for the time being, you'll at least get a bonus episode the following Wednesday. I don't know how many episodes we'll have up by this time. We should at least have up 2 or 3. So we would have talked about Being John Malkovich, which is a free episode, which you can actually already find here on this YouTube channel if you're listening on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to us. The first bonus episode was free. We just wanted to give you guys a little taste of what that would be like. We should have episode 2, which is on the Sidney Lumet Film Network, and then I believe episode 3, which is Old Boy, the South Korean Park Chan-wook film. So those should all be up by now, so you can go check that out. We wanted to have like a little bit of a backlog of content, so we have a bunch of episodes in the vault ready to unleash on you guys. So yeah, if you like us, head over there and check us out. Again, $2 a month. That's very small. That's like one iced coffee at Dunkin', a small iced coffee. So every bit of monetary help that you guys can throw our way helps us keep the show going, help us keep the lights on. The lights in our apartment, we don't have studios. So but with that all aside, guys, like Josh said, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate the support, and yeah, interact with us over on our socials. But that's really it for today. One last time, we are talking about the Cornetto trilogy on the next episode. So 2 Tuesdays from now, you can hear us talk about the Edgar Wright comedy trilogy starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. So check out those films if you don't want to be spoiled, and stay tuned for next episode. But that's it for me. Goodbye.
Catch you later.